we'd like to thank all the participants, for your active participation and engaging discussion on the first day. And I hope you enjoyed the musical performance and the good dinner. So before we start the session, I have few announcements. So the presentation agenda booklets, DPIDG products booklet are uploaded on the UNPOC website. Please, I hope you scan the QR code yesterday. I will put this QR code on your table again. I'll ask my colleague to put the QR codes so that you can scan the QR codes to assess those materials. So without further ado, now we'll begin the thematic session 2 on rating public institutions for strategic planning and foresight. And I would like to invite Dr. Marius Ostujin. Apology if I pronounce your name wrong. He's a practice lead for Learning and Transformation, School of International Future, who will be moderating the session. Dr. Marius has a passion to help strategic leaders in government, business, and civil society adapt to complex challenges using ethical awareness and future-oriented strategy. He specializes in using strategic foresight processes, including scenario planning for policy and strategy development. He has 15 years of experience in broad membership as well as consulting and capacity building for executive level corporate and governance board in various sectors. More recently, he has been the lead faculty of the Foresight for System Transformation of the UN Global Pulse, through which more than 80 individuals across UN agencies have been trained in foresight approaches. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Marius with a big round of applause.
Well, good morning, colleagues. It's wonderful to be with you. We have a really interesting panel lined up to discuss how we ready institutions for the use of foresight and strategic planning. I'm going to keep my own remarks until the end so that I can make some summative remarks in the process. What I would like to do is to welcome our first panelist who is with us online through video, Veronica Verbruggen. She's the Senior Inter-Regional Advisor for Governance and Public Institutions, of course, with DPIDG as well as with UNDESA. Veronica comes with many, many years of experience, specifically focused on SDG 16. She's worked in Somalia, Kenya, the Northern Caucasus around Russia, the Ukraine, the Western Balkans, having worked with the British Department of International Development. Ms. Verbruggen comes with a tremendous amount of background from which to share with us from her experience. Let's listen to Veronica.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Veronique Verbruggen. I'm Senior Inter-Regional Advisor on Governance and Institution Building at DPIDG and focusing on providing capacity building to member states on issues of institutional arrangements for the implementation of the SDGs and on sound policy making. Now, before elaborating on the question of how can the principles of effective governance equip public institutions for strategic planning and foresight, I would like to bring us back to the Brundtland definition on sustainable development. So sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This means that to truly achieve coherent outcomes in the long term, we need to consider the impact of today's policy decisions and actions elsewhere and in the future. We understand that in strategic planning, it is important to look back and understand why certain events happened, who key actors are, unpack power dynamics that may influence change. But besides looking at the past, how can we envisage the future, and how can the future help us make better decisions today? H.G. Wells, who is considered as the founder of future studies, made the point that we are making the future, and hardly any of us troubles to think what future we are making. Futures thinking and strategic foresight is not a new concept, as you may know, and requires a system thinking mindset, which means that we have to think of parts as a whole and not as separate entities. And we have to consider the interactions between each other. There are many different definitions. One of them is, like it was mentioned in one of the strategic guidance notes that I will talk about later on of strategic foresight. It is an organized, systematic way of looking beyond the expected and to engage with uncertainty and complexity. So it's basically important to have or develop a common understanding of the future based on comprehensive scan of the current drivers of change. It requires a multi-stakeholder perspective, and it is meant to build a consensus towards joint vision of a common desirable future. What is important also to mention is that the processes allowing to explore possible futures are as valuable as the outcomes. Now, let us go back to the principles now of effective governance and how the strategy guidance notes help to equip public institutions, specifically also on the topic of strategic foresight. Mr. Lancue already referred to the principles of effective governance yesterday. The United Nations Committee of Experts on Public Administration, SAPA, have developed 11 voluntary principles of effective governance for sustainable development, with a focus on effectiveness, accountability, and inclusiveness. These principles were adopted in 2018 by ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council, and they provide countries with practical expert guidance at national and local level. The first three principles are about increasing the effectiveness of public institutions. Among the 8 strategy guidance notes for sound policy making is the paper on strategic planning and foresight. You can find the link to the paper on the slide. The paper includes information on how a government can assess its status, measure progress in applying the strategy to national policy-making process, and includes case studies and good practices with practical illustrative guidance. What we have tried to do at DPIDG is to use the opportunity of the pandemic to raise the awareness on the principles, and very much on 3 strategies related to sound policy making during the pandemic on strategic foresight, policy coherence, and risk management. We noticed that by organizing webinars on those topics in the Latin American region and for Africa, there appeared to be a great interest, not in the least, of course, during the pandemic. More and more governments realized that it was going to be really important to anticipate, to become better at anticipating the risks, managing risks, and using strategic foresight to increase the resilience of the governments, and to also provide better policy making in their governments. So after providing such an awareness raising session in Africa, 5 countries came forward and asked to basically provide an assessment on the state of play with regards to strategic foresight in their countries. These were Kenya, Madagascar, Zambia, Ghana, and South Africa. And so 5 papers were produced, or papers were produced to expand on the state of play for their countries, and to also elaborate a bit on good practice countries like, for example, Cabo Verde and Morocco. We invited in the webinar for those countries in Africa, Cabo Verde, and the government, together with the UN Resident Coordinator's Office, gave a joint presentation on what were their experiences with regards to strategic foresight, the challenges they had encountered, and this was a very useful exercise for the purpose of peer-to-peer learning. Now, after we have organized this webinar together with the Cabo Verde. The government of Cabo Verde and the UN approached us because they basically wanted to organize a strategic foresight exercise with stakeholders from the UN agencies, the government, the World Bank, involving also the Director of Planning, Presidency of the Republic, the private sector, Chamber of Commerce and Stock Exchange, and also quite a lot of other donor partners of the donor community. They wanted to develop or trigger a joint reflection on possible future scenarios in Cabo Verde and co-create the UN Sustainable Cooperation Framework. The UN Sustainable Cooperation Framework is the 4-year strategic framework agreement between the UN and the UN government, The exercise focused on shared vision on Cabo Verde, different possible and desirable futures. They did this by inviting all participants on an imaginary boat trip stationed at a port in 2030. Different methodologies on strategic foresight were used. I'm not going to expand on those different approaches because I'm quite certain that also Marius Oosthuizen in his presentation will touch upon this. But in the end, what was important is that these group discussions were held while in disembarking from their backward trip on this imaginary boat trip from 2030 to 2024. So they held different group discussions, and at the end they all said that this joint exercise strengthened the strategic policy discussion and planning between the government and the other stakeholders. So it appeared to have been a very useful exercise to improve the strategic policy discussions with regards to their planning and improved collaboration between the government and other stakeholders. The role of the resident coordinator's office was to be a facilitator in this exercise, and we have basically provided some advisory support. Now, what we also will do in 2023 is that we will collaborate with the School of International Futures, again based on the strategic guidance note on foresight, to support Pakistan with capacity building on strategic foresight, to help them with the implementation of a joint initiative of the Ministry of Climate Change and the United Nations in Pakistan, to help them with the ecological restoration of the Indus Basin. The Indus Basin is most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, which translates into both extreme heat waves and floodings. And you will know probably that Pakistan is currently suffering terrible consequences from the floodings. Effects on the water resources will amplify impacts for all other sectors, like irrigation for agriculture. Climate change affects grazing lands for the livestock. It affects the hydroelectricity supplies and forests, which will have an impact on the country's biodiversity and the soil quality. Climate change will also affect the fish reproduction, growth, and the migration patterns of fish. So as you can see, there is an increasing interest in the topic of strategic foresight from the member states and the UN agencies, and definitely also having increased following the consequences of the pandemic. We will also try to provide further capacity building in Asia and the Pacific region on this topic including to small and island developing countries that have to deal with the multiple structural constraints. And we will do this in collaboration with UNPOC. So I hope that this gives you a bit of a flavor of how the principles of effective governance, specifically focusing on this occasion on strategic foresight, can help to equip indeed public institutions with addressing some of the challenges that they come across in the implementation of the SDGs. For more information, you can contact me on the following email address, and enjoy the rest of the webinar. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Veronica, and what an excellent input. For those who are interested, the method that she was referring to when she spoke about the boat trip coming back from the future is called backcasting. You can read more about the method and we can share more about that. Our next panelist will also join us online. It's my pleasure to introduce Donna Andrews. Donna is the Global Lead for Public Institutional Reform and Global Governance at the World Bank. Donna is the lead for public institutions reform at the World Bank. She is based in Washington, D.C., although she comes originally from Australia, and of course has a widespread experience in East Asia, the Pacific region, having worked in Suva, Fiji, where she led the civil service and human resource management reform, and so comes with great insights on the future of government through her current work on the Future of Government initiative. Let's welcome Donna. Donna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marcus and Marius. Sorry, good morning to all of the symposium participants. Thank you to the organisers for the invitation to talk to you a little bit about the future of government work that we are doing in the World Bank. So in May 2020, we set in the governance global practice at the World Bank, set about starting a discussion about what the future of government might look like. So we wanted to open a debate, really, about how a crisis like COVID-19 can help push governments to be better. So we wanted to talk about how governments could use the opportunity to change for the better and to build more effective, accountable and resilient governments. So over a 6-month period, we invited a diverse range of panelists from across the globe to debate a number of critical questions in order to generate some new knowledge and perspectives about how government might change in the future. And the result was our report released in June this year called The Future of Government, Reimagining Government for Good. Next slide, please. So why is now the time to reimagine government? Well, the world really is at an inflection point and governments are at the centre of a triad of crisis. So we have COVID, we have climate and we have conflict. Now, over recent decades, governments across the world have made significant contributions to the progress of development. So they have largely helped to control inflation, reduce extreme poverty, enable a technological revolution in mobile telephony, and they've increased access to basic services. But they've continued to face a number of unresolved governance problems. And in some instances, they're really struggling to inclusively and sustainably meet many of the basic needs of their citizens. Now, the Future of Government initiative provides a framework for reimagining government to create a shared positive vision of the future that cuts through complexity and focuses on key opportunities for action. So every government's different and there are no one-size-fits-all answers to the unique problems that governments are facing. So we recognise this uniqueness and can help governments to start governing differently and change for good. Next slide, please. Of course, over the course of history, governments have demonstrated many positive traits as well as some failings, and we need to learn from these and build upon them. The Future of Government creates a vision of the government of the future, which contrasts with what we know about the government of the past. So while the characterisations are general, I think they're likely to resonate particularly with citizens across the world. So we can see the government of the past is unresponsive to context. They leave a history of broken promises. They often lurch from crisis to crisis. They pander to and enrich elites. They resist change and they're often mistrusted without being held to account. By contrast, the government of the future has a clear vision of its role and is responsive to the demands of citizens, can influence and deliver, is innovative, productive, trusted and prepared for crisis, and is able to transform the rising tide of public distrust and scepticism into inclusive and sustainable development solutions. So in order to seize the opportunity to change for good, governments need to move beyond the characteristics of the government of the past and embrace the vision of the government of the future. Next slide, please. Reimagining the future of government certainly in a post-COVID world involves redefining the social contract between government, citizens and elites by tackling 4 key questions and setting about answering them in ways that are different to the ways that government might have done in the past, and ones that primarily focus on participatory processes. So firstly, looking at what is the role of future role of government. So what are the key outcomes that citizens want to see? And does the role of government align with these expectations? Or are governments doing too much or too little? Secondly, how can government be more productive? So for those services that the government is responsible for, how can it use the scarce resources effectively, and will it have the capacity to satisfy citizens? Thirdly, how can government deliver? If it's the government that's the responsible actor for public service delivery, can it deliver on the social outcomes with the resources available and perhaps with the support or allegiance of non-state actors? And fourthly, how can government build trust? Is the alignment of citizen-state bargaining and a stable social contract sufficient to create deep levels of trust in government? What factors outside a government's control impact trust, and how can it ensure a continued alignment of citizen expectations and outcomes to maintain trust? So for a renewed social contract to be sustainable and effective, it needs to be supported by an elite bargain. So power, authority, and resources that enable governments to function are typically concentrated in elites, not in the broader citizenry. So therefore, the deals reached by elites are critical for governments to deliver on the social contract. For elite bargains to be developmental, it's critical that elites commit to outcomes that benefit the broader society and not just themselves. So to be sustainable, the social contract needs to be dynamic. So it evolves over time to reflect changes in citizen-state relationships, the distribution of power, and in social attitudes. So governments need to be adaptable and proactive to understand and subsequently address any misalignment in expectations and outcomes in their relationship with citizens. Next slide, please. So one thing is clear, that actions that governments take in the months and years ahead will be critical in redefining a country's social contract. The urgent journey to deliver positive change is a challenging one, and it's one that won't be straightforward. So no single government leader or institution can solve all of the challenges faced by government and meet all of its demands and expectations. An essential element of the journey is to build the coalitions that are needed for reform and collaboratively agree on the pathways forward and embark on a collective journey to deliver change. And governments need to envisage their capabilities in conjunction to what the private sector and communities contribute. They're not going this alone. So beginning a process to renew the social contract will be an incremental journey, and one where governments, together with coalitions, can take deliberate, coordinated steps forward, learn from the progress and missteps along the way, and be flexible and adjust the route as they progress. So governments will need to openly identify the key conundrums that they face and make deliberate choices to address them, and look for catalysts and opportunities for change. So within and outside every government, in every country of the world, there are people who can make a difference and change their respective governments for good. As the global economic context is darkening further, it's now time for those people to really refocus and act where it's needed. Next slide. So governments can take the first steps by starting a conversation. So the entry points for taking action are multiple and varied. They'll exist at the centre of government, at local government, across sectors, or maybe in a particular sector. It could involve convening a group of stakeholders in the education sector to tackle a learning crisis in schools. It could involve convening communities and local governments to discuss how livelihoods in rural and urban areas can be made more secure. It could involve a leader at the centre of a national government or a local government convening their executives to reset and agree on a small number of priority issues that the government can tackle as a whole. Then together, they can re-examine the social contract, understand the situation at hand, identify the critical issues to focus on, plot pathways, agree the route, and act. The initial conversation that leads to action need not take months. It can take place over a few days and just be revisited again and again. Whilst change can be rapid, the teams that drive change and coalitions that need to support it are aware that change is more often incremental. It takes time and requires persistence and determination to deliver. Yet change is possible all the same. What is needed now is governments that are prepared to take the first step in the journey towards being a government of the future. Next slide. So this has been a very brief presentation about the Future of Government initiative at the World Bank. I would encourage you certainly to visit our website for more information, or certainly reach out to any of the Future of Government team, and we would be very happy to tell you more. Thank you very much, and back to you, Marius.
Thank you, Donna. And we might return to that topic of the renewal of the social contract. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Colleagues, we now come to the room here where we are, a little bit closer to home. Kasho Piradi is the Director for Monitoring and Evaluation in the Project Management Office of the Kartu Prakerja in Indonesia. He comes with 17 years of experience focused on children and youth issues. But of course, coming from Indonesia, working with the Ministry of Economic Affairs, has a wonderful lens at the grassroots in the practical world of making governance work. And so let's welcome Mr. Prihadi to share with us.
Thank you, Mr. Marius. Good morning and good day to all distinguished speakers and respected audience in this room and by virtue. I would like to present on the practice of the first digital transformation of a public service in Indonesia, Kartu Prakerja program. Okay. Why Kartu Prakerja for Indonesia? Lack of skills is one of Indonesia's main concerns. According to Statistic Indonesia, 90% of the Indonesian labor force has never attended any trainings. From the World Bank study in 2016, training is ranked as the last priority for Indonesian workers. The reason for this is that there is a lack of access, money, and time to register and purchase training. Other findings tell us that workers do not see the existing trainings in line with their interests, whereas companies consider employee trainings not a necessity. In response to that, in 2019, President Joko Widodo initiated a program to boost competence, competitiveness, productivity, and entrepreneurship. The president himself gives a strong mandate. The idea is Kartu Prakerja. Indonesia is vast archipelago with 17,000 islands, home to more 270 million people. With its diverse demographics, a wide socioeconomic and infrastructure gap is present. The government should come up with a refined, practical program for its people. The question now is, how do we design a large-scale public service to be distributed accountably and swiftly and overcome these obstacles in such a limited time? The design of the program was created from hundreds of discussions with all relevant stakeholders. The government attended to all inputs and deliberation to best execute the program. Finally, a presidential decree was released to give the assignment to the Kartu Prakerja Project Management Office, or called PMO, to implement the program with supervision of the Cipta Kerja Committee in 2020, a day after the COVID-19 mobility restriction policy. The Cipta Kerja Committee consists of 14 ministries led by the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs. The PMO approach allows Executive Director of PMO, Kartu Prakerja, to act as a work unit and proxy of the budget user, making the discretion of budget use. This approach allows a room for PMO to innovate, which sometimes requires a change of budget allocation in a short period of time. A good policy means nothing without operational excellence, execution of the program. The Project Management Office of Kartu Prakerja is open to include skilled and experienced professionals beyond government institutions. Another key of success so far is then having the policymakers and professionals to cooperate, agile and adaptive. Willingness to listen to the needs of the operational side is a key for well-executed policy. Innovation is essential to ensure we can overcome issues by keeping in mind that people should receive full benefit of the program. Kartu Prakerja applies a customer-centric approach we reach out to people and diminish boundaries, give voices and choices to people. Applicants are welcome to self-register with 100% digital service, end-to-end, and available 24/7. Once selected as beneficiary, they are free to purchase training in line with their interests with the given incentive. And contact center is provided. Providing quality and market-based training is no task for the government alone. Partnership is needed. The Kartu Prakerja ecosystem consists of local and national government, e-marketplaces, universities, non-profit organizations, and many more. To deliver training, digital technology is the way to go. It makes things happen. For instance, a tutor in Jakarta can give online trainings for beneficiaries in remote places. The cloud technology allows the Kartu Prakerja program to be delivered in scale, speed, and transparency. The recent COVID-19 pandemic brought disruption, limiting people's mobility. Using digital technology, the Kartu Prakerja program is able to deliver the objective while other government programs are on hold. This government-to-person approach with cash conditional transfer were made possible through the state-mandated bank, dispersing the payment through our payment partners. Beneficiaries can choose their preferred payment platform. Bank, e-wallet, all are available. Every penny is well recorded and easy to check. The Kartu Prakerja training course are our response to the challenges in the future of the world. The PMO is aware of the noble responsibility of the President's mandate. The program has to become a catalyst on the supply side to cater to the market demands. Beneficiaries of Kartu Prakerja expressed that they are able to acquire the 4.0 working skills of the future according to McKinsey Global Institute, including self-leadership, cognitive, interpersonal skills, and digital skills. As of now, there are more than 1,000 training courses in 12 categories from 185 qualified training institutions. We also partner with job portals. They are taking the role to bridge the job market and job seekers. In the Kartu Prakerja ecosystem, each element has a synergic role. While government formulates regulation and does monitoring, the private sectors are responsible for the implementation. And on the top of that, all available training courses are monitored by partnering experts from universities and NGO. Tracking outcomes of the program is important. We conduct 3 surveys upon the completion of first training. This is to maintain quality of trainings received by the beneficiaries. Does it work? The Kartu Prakerja program does work. We have scientific evidence from independent research institutions such as JEPAL and Presisi Indonesia. We're glad that this research shows positive impacts of the program. To name a few, 18% increase in probability of starting a new job, 33% increase in female monthly income. Even World Bank study on Kartu Prakerja's G2P also shows its side impacts of accelerating financial inclusion. Statistics Indonesia's National Labor Force Survey also indicated that the Kartu Prakerja program has successfully contributed to moving the needle. When first initiated in 2019, only 10.4% of the labor force had attended trainings in their lives. But looking at the number now, in 2022, the number has increased to 16%. Kartu Prakerja is now reaching 16 million. There are plenty of stories. We hear from those who were unemployed and are now employed, those who confidently apply for the jobs with their training certificates, and those who move to a better working place or become entrepreneurs. Our work is still far from over. Other stories will follow. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Marius.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prahadi, for pulling away the curtain and showing us a quick vision of what digital can do for government. We stay in the room now with Dr. Trish Lovery, Senior Strategic Analyst in the Executive Director's Office at the OECD. Dr. Trish is experienced in behavioral insights, systems thinking, structured analytical techniques, having joined the OECD in 2021. With 10 years of experience in Australia's Government Environment Department, she now uses strategic foresight in the Office of the Secretary General. Welcome, Dr. Lovery.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. Distinguished colleagues, thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate. My name is Trish Lavery. I'm a strategic foresight analyst from the Office of the Secretary General in the OECD. And we have a remit to promote the adoption of strategic foresight and futures thinking. Strategic foresight is increasingly being viewed as a necessary tool for modern management. Yesterday we heard that cascading crises are limiting our ability to progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Progress can't be dependent on the absence of crises. We must be able to deliver despite crisis circumstances. And I advocate strategic foresight as a tool that we can use to better understand the range of possible future challenges and bake in today the resilience that we need so that we can continue to progress on our goals even under crisis circumstances. We've recently published a guide, and this is available online, and it looks across multiple government and looks for common factors among the ones that have successfully institutionalized strategic foresight in their governments. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, unfortunately. If you want to embed foresight into your government, the way you do that depends on what and how you want to use the strategic foresight products. But it almost always requires a couple of things, and these are the establishment of dedicated foresight institutions and frameworks, and the building of a foresight culture across the institution. So let's talk about those two things in a little bit more detail now. In looking first at the establishment of dedicated foresight institutions and frameworks, what does that actually mean? Well, it means that the way that you set up your foresight capacity should be designed in a way that's tailored to your country and how you want to use foresight. For example, are you going to use strategic foresight with your senior politicians so that they can better understand a range of possible futures and use that in their decision-making process? Or alternatively, are you going to use strategic foresight with your on-ground policy officers so that the quality of information they're providing up to leaders is improved? How you go about setting up foresight in your organisation is going to be different, but depending on which one of those you choose. But it always requires explicit buy-in from senior leaders and decision makers. This is absolutely crucial. It's important that the foresight exercises that you run are open and honest, and people feel like they were able to voice any concerns or shortcomings that they might see with regard to a policy or strategy. It needs to be protected, this process, from the politics of the day. And it's important too that leaders understand that the job of strategic foresight is to ask the hard questions. We look at current plans and strategies and think about what might change in the future which might derail these. It can be scary sometimes for senior leaders to have these conversations. And it's important to understand that by doing this, it's not a criticism of the policy or the strategy. It's a way to make it stronger by looking at what might disrupt it in future and making small changes today to make the policy or strategy more robust to those possible future changes. Moving on now to building a culture of foresight. So this obviously requires training, widespread training of public and civil servants, and participation in foresight exercises. Often this occurs after the training the training can be reinforced by the building of professional networks or community of practices so that civil servants can continue to learn from each other. The Strategic Foresight Unit where I work always advocates a learn by doing component of all our foresight training. And we've developed a model that can be integrated into a training package that walks participants through a 5-step foresight process as part of their training. I'm sure we've all, well, certainly I have had that experience where you go and attend some training and it all sounds very sensible and straightforward until you get back to your desk and try and do it yourself. And then you hit a roadblock and you can't progress any further. By taking participants of our training through the entire foresight process, we're hoping that that really bakes in and really solidifies the knowledge, but we're also getting great feedback that it's also a great opportunity to have the OECD come in and work with you on future-proofing a current policy challenge. So we're able to walk participants through this 5-step process very quickly in a couple of days because we've done the background research. We've used our thematic experts across the OECD and drawn on international foresight experts to identify over 30 plausible future changes, disruptions we call them, that might change the world in the 2030 to 2050 period. And we work with governments and ask them for these processes to choose 8 to 10 of these disruptions, the ones that are most relevant and interesting for them. So when we do our foresight expert, participants are given a quick 2-pager. It's not a lot to get over, but it really brings them up to speed on both the current situation with this disruption and also what a future might look like in the 2030 to 2050 period if this disruption was brought to bear. For example, we have a disruption about conspiracy chaos. What might happen in a future where language processing and deep fake technology becomes so advanced that even the most well-meaning citizen struggles to know who to trust? How would governments communicate with their citizens under this case? And what would that mean for regulation and how might it be implemented? So we then walk the participants through this 5-step process. We first look at the disruptions one at a time and think about what that means for them across all domains of government. Then we start to pair them and we look at interactions. What if 2 or 3 of them happened at the same time? And from this, we build scenarios and we strategize for each scenario. And then we come back to our current policy or plan of the day. And it's not about saying it's flawed or we need to throw it out and start again. We use this process to think about what small tweaks we can make to the current process or plan that will enable it to be more robust in the face of these future possible challenges. So let me just give you a couple of quick examples. We recently worked with the Philippines. They were particularly interested in a world where Indigenous voices might become more heard across all avenues of policies. And what that might mean for them for education, innovation, tourism and employment. We also worked with the Philippines to stress test their Philippines development plan. And they were interested in a world where significant advances in AI might disrupt some large segments of their employment. And what that would mean and what they could do today to ensure that if that future became a reality, they could pivot really quickly to take advantage of opportunities. We are always looking for partner countries and organisations to pilot with, so please do grab me at the morning tea or lunch or send me an email if you're interested in chatting about this further. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish, and some exciting work being done at the OECD on foresight. Looking forward to taking those conversations forward. Our last panelist here online as well, Stephen Machethaler, Dr. Stephen, in fact, Head of Strategic Intelligence and member of the Executive Committee at the World Economic Forum. He's responsible for the strategic analysis capacity on global trends. You can read more about that at intelligence.wefforum.org, as well as its digital innovation strategy. He has been responsible for developing the network of global future councils, the global innovations community, the global university leaders forum, and so comes with tremendous experience in connecting with individuals across the globe on the issue of global trends and foresight. And so let's welcome Stephen for his remarks.
Thank you very much indeed, Marius. Thank you to the hosts, the organizers. It's a great pleasure to be able to contribute to this distinguished panel here. And I'd really like to commend the organizers for putting together such a broad spectrum of practices and perspectives. And I would like to, in my short intervention here, really reflect on the experience we've had at the World Economic Forum, working with a whole range of institutions, both public and private, on strategy and foresight, and focus maybe not so much on the what, but rather on the how, on how we actually put these practices and these mindsets into practice, recognizing that, of course, when we talk about foresight in public institutions, it means transforming them in a way that allows them to better respond to, be more flexible, more agile in addressing today's networked policy challenges, in a way readying them for the complexity of the issues we're facing, and that were already part of some of the interventions that preceded me. And I would like to briefly lay out the context of why, in this context, we need a new perspective, a new mindset in public institutions, then provide 3 practical steps, really inspired by the practice of doing this with organizations, of how to infuse this perspective in institutions, and then end on a quick illustration of how we do this with our work on strategic intelligence in particular. And so to focus on this question of why we need to infuse a new perspective, a new systems perspective, as was mentioned before, I think 4 key motivating factors here. Avoiding blind spots. We need to ensure that we address not just the right problems, but also that our interventions don't create unintended consequences, which in a context of increasing network phenomena is increasingly a challenge. We need to broaden the decision frame, the frames upon which we take decisions, to ensure that we not just optimize within narrow areas of responsibility, but actually work towards systemic change and affect change in the wider environment. We need to overcome institutional biases. That's important to actually build holistic policies that leave no one behind, and challenge some of the legacy thinking and path dependency we have enshrined in institutions. And finally, we need to leverage outside expertise and ensure that we really draw upon the widest possible expertise and perspectives in approaching problems. And that really then constitutes a way of introducing systems thinking, thinking about a context in which multiple trends and forces interconnect and create an environment where emergent behavior can create unexpected outcomes, but also unexpected areas where opportunities for intervention and progress lay increasingly not at the core necessarily of an area of focus, but at the strategic periphery. And so this ability to not just understand and map the system, but also continuously scanning that strategic periphery of that system for areas of opportunity is incredibly important. And so practical steps to foster that kind of mindset in institutions. I would again propose 3 very, very practical steps, and then hopefully briefly illustrate that with our work. nurturing cross-functional teams. And I should say, by the way, the intervention by Mr. Prihadi previously, I think, illustrated in very practical terms many of these things with the example from Indonesia. But maybe just to synthesize these points, helping nurture cross-functional teams to practice new forms of collaboration, and doing that maybe in areas or in the absence of a broad-based program like the one that was presented, doing it by constituting bottom-up coalitions around a very specific policy problem. Maybe a very pragmatic way of starting to expose stakeholders to the benefits and opportunities in building these cross-functional networks across government. Secondly, adopting really an open and participatory process that allows to pilot opportunities for collaboration, co-creation, co-production, maybe again piloting that in non-strategic areas where there may be greater openness for that. And then finally, focusing on, again, as was illustrated in the example from Indonesia, augmenting capabilities with technology, introducing a technology-driven solution that can complement internal capabilities. And if I can just briefly illustrate this in the work that we're doing at the World Economic Forum, we've been thinking about how we can practically put this kind of thinking into practical assets and tools and methods that we use to structure our stakeholder engagement. And with our work in strategic intelligence, we provide an open and collaborative platform to foster that systems awareness and hopefully encourage new collaborations. We do that based on a very broad collaborative process with input and expertise from universities, international organizations, a very large network of experts that contribute and curate content, but also drawing on machine intelligence to scan a very broad set of expert analysis. And then we bring this into practical tools and workshops where we help groups actually build collaboratively these system maps, really in a playful way, almost like Lego blocks, build together different issues that may be at the focus. I just built a very illustrative example here around some of the issues of this regional symposium, but really to allow for a participatory process that then also helps actors illustrate that systems perspective and convey and communicate the outcomes and perspectives from that. And with that, just in conclusion, we hope we can contribute to infusing that systems perspective in a very practical way, again, by allowing people to work with those maps, and in that process nurture cross-functional collaboration, an open and participatory process, and augmenting capabilities with technology. With that, I will stop here and look forward to the continued dialogue and to the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Stephen. Let's give Stephen a hand for his good input. Appreciate that. Lots of interesting intelligence to be had from the work that the WEF has done. Before I move to concluding remarks and take some questions in the time we have remaining, we have an important panelist online joining us, His Excellency Kalfan Buhul, of course, the CEO of the Dubai Futures Foundation. The Futures Foundation brings more than a decade of experience in driving, transforming business and organizations. This is, of course, the work of His Excellency through his work in Dubai's strategy for economic diversification, as well as various board memberships, not only of the Future Foundation, but also the Vice President of Dubai Holdings and other organizations. So let's welcome His Excellency to the floor.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Dubai Future Foundation and the UAE, I would like to express how much of an honor it is to join you today as we partake in such crucial discussions revolving around building the future and sustaining government performance. Allow me to start by saying that we are not only here to share our humble experience and insights, but we are also here to gain more knowledge, new knowledge, on different practices used around the world and how they can be implemented back home. We have found that the School of Future Foresight is one that marches to the beat of togetherness. For it is only through the unity that we can begin to achieve and embrace excellence. Excellence and innovation have always been at the center of the UAE government's strategy for future building. Our founding fathers championed innovation in all its forms, from digital to intellectual, and all that may fall in between. As a result, we went from a simple port country to a thriving metropolis, a country with no universities to one with world-class universities. We went from no motorways to a remarkable landing on Mars. Today, we are actively prioritizing humanity's energy needs, building a post-oil economy and also further enriching our knowledge-based economy. We are able to explore these different sectors through the modern and future-friendly methods implemented by the UAE's government. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai's vision is to treat government excellence as a sum of different parts interlinked together. The concept of Dubai Future Foundation was born out of this vision and was established in 2016, a direct result of the government's institutionalizing foresight to enhance governance and future readiness. Dubai Future Foundation collectively imagines, designs, and executes the future of the city. Its efforts provide an outlook to the future by providing a pioneering space for futurists to convene and find solutions for the challenges of tomorrow. Over a period of 6 years, Dubai Future Foundation has established many initiatives and programs. The foundation is able to foster innovation and promote advanced ecosystems, utilizing both accelerators and incubators that attract companies and projects to Dubai. A formula that challenges the status quo and puts in place the framework of a future-ready city. We recognize the vital role future foresight plays in building effective governments. For instance, our Dubai Future Councils nurture the idea of tasking leaders with future forecasting to find solutions to the various challenges that we face. They are tasked with launching new initiatives, national strategies, and are encouraged to leap at opportunities with pure alacrity. We are guided by our leadership to think outside the box and to welcome disruption with open arms. Whether it is through the World Government Summit, where each year leaders and governments from around the world gather in Dubai to discuss governmental policies, focusing on futurism, technology and innovation, or on a smaller scale, where it is through the development of the startup landscape in Dubai, like that of Dubai Future Accelerators. We are advocates of change. Just to put a few things into perspective, I would like to lay out a few examples. One of the first government accelerators in the world, DFA has led to more than 274 million dirhams in startups and innovation, and $1 billion dirhams worth of global funding raised by companies that are part of our ecosystem. In the name of innovation, we have entered new worlds and dimensions. This year, we managed to introduce the Dubai Metaverse strategy, where we aim to transform Dubai into one of the world's top 10 metaverse economies, as well as a global hub for the metaverse community. With this strategy, we aim to support more than 40,000 virtual jobs by 2030. The vision of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum continues to transform Dubai into a leading city of the future through the support of a pioneering government and the principles of effective governance for sustainable development. It is through such that we are able to address unanticipated challenges and future unknown shocks. The principles of effective governance for sustainable development provide us with practical expert guidance. They provide a baseline for policy making while strengthening evidence-based and action-oriented implementation of the 2030 Agenda. In harmony with the principles, we at the Dubai Future Foundation inaugurated the Dubai Future Forum, the world's largest two-day gathering of futurists. We gathered more than 400 experts, 70 speakers, 1,000 attendees, and 45 leading institutes to tackle the rapid changes the world is witnessing today and prepare ourselves for the world of tomorrow. We introduced the forum as a global platform to collaborate and exchange knowledge. Taking place at Dubai's latest landmark, the Museum of the Future, the Dubai Future Foundation birthed the Global Futurist Society, a momentous partnership that will pave the way for nations to navigate and build a brighter future for humanity. Of course, we cannot guarantee what the future holds for us and for the generations to come, but we can address the importance of exploring future readiness through research as well as create laws and policies that allow us to grasp future opportunities. As we look towards the future, we need to continue to utilize partnerships and build governance and regulatory frameworks that will enable more and more of our countries to achieve the SDGs by the set goal of 2030. Not only is Dubai a strong benchmark for this, but it is also a global hub for collaboration, open to governments from around the world to meet and work towards building future-proof tools. On behalf of the Dubai Future Foundation and the UAE, I invite you today to join us on our quest to build a better tomorrow for all, through strategic planning, future foresight, and effective governance. Thank you.
Wonderful. Colleagues, if you'd allow me to make some concluding remarks and to share some of my own thoughts on the matter of the future of government. We have had wonderful examples of what futuristic approaches look like, quite inspiring, wonderful examples of the good work being done by various institutions using foresight. From our perspective as the School of International Futures, we think that there are three major challenges that we are facing around good governance. And these are not new challenges. They as old as time immemorial, the issues of interests or vested interests, the issues of power, and the issues of participation. And so the question is, can we use foresight to find new mechanisms to overcome interests, to overcome the imbalances of power, and to enhance the processes of participation? And we think this is crucial. We think if we succeed in this, what we will achieve is that leaders will make intergenerationally fair decisions, that this will become increasingly important as we look around the world as at a youth cohort that often is excluded from decision making, often feels that their voice is not at the table. We think that we can achieve organizations and sectors that are better prepared for the future using foresight. And then very importantly, we think that foresight provides a mechanism for citizens to be involved in shaping their own desired futures. And so instead of governance or government deciding or thinking, imagining on behalf of citizens, that we can create a mechanism whereby citizens themselves become involved in the process. Now, what does that look like? What that means is that governments move from a perspective of the future that is informed by hindsight, which is backward looking, or insight, which is interested only in the present, to a future informed by foresight. You'll notice on that model that I'm sharing this idea of the cone of plausibility, or the futures cone, as some like to call it. We think that through strategic foresight, we're able to move the conversation from the past and the present, and to move the conversation into that space within that cone, that future space. Now, why is that so interesting? Because in that future space, the vested interests are not at play. The future is open, it's to be discovered, it's to be created. In that future space, the power relations in our society could look very different. And so in that future space, by creating participation, we're enabling voices that don't have power today or whose interests are not understood today to participate in that conversation. As we've seen, strategic foresight at the level of a method is an organized or systematic process to engage with uncertainty regarding the future. This is a set of capabilities that governments very often are very bad at or struggle with in navigating uncertainty. It is, as the European Union says, a systemic, participatory, future intelligence gathering, medium to long-term building, vision building aimed at enabling present-day decisions. So foresight is not, as we say, airy-fairy or pie in the sky. Foresight can be practical. It can be about informing our decisions today. Within the UN, we are very excited to see the rapid adoption of foresight. We're working with UNDESA, with UNGP, with the International Training Center of the ILO, to really materialize this vision that the Secretary General has expressed in our common agenda. And I'll read what he says. He says, the UN will review its work to strengthen its capacity, will include conducting future impact assessments on major policies, convening foresight and planning experts across the UN system. And then he goes on to say how the UN will do this in a participative way, which values instead of discounting the future. And so we're excited to see this development in the work that we're doing with the UNGP. Right now, we're engaging in a series of capacity building engagements. These are formulated to be action learning processes. Just last night, we were engaging with a group of about 40 individuals across multiple country teams, using foresight at a very practical level in Cambodia, in Cape Verde, in Bolivia, in various countries around the world, thinking through futures labs about the theory of foresight, and then through futures clinics about the practical application of foresight. Now, I want to turn very briefly, as I come to a conclusion, to the question of the future of government. We were recently engaging in a 3-day workshop on the future of government and governance. And what emerged was quite interesting, that the participants did not imagine government as a digital platform that is enabling digital government. Instead, they emphasized things such as, number one, an ethic of care or empathy or systems of care that can rebuild the social fabric and bring healing and create value. And so this was quite surprising, not government as a technical capability, but really government that enables, or governance that enables the space for a new ethic of care. If you see there number 2, 3, and 4, this will involve a rethinking of our philosophy of governance. In the US Declaration of Independence, it uses these words, we find these truths to be self-evident. And so the question for the future is, what will be the truths that we will find to be self-evident? Will they be sustainability? Will they be human dignity? What are the new truths that we need to discover? How will we remember what our participants said, the aspects of humanity that we should consider to be sacred or transcendent? And how will we develop radical imagination for things like justice, restoration, especially for the next generation? Now, at a practical level, we do believe that there will be new social models. Number 5, there will be new approaches to well-being. But importantly, those approaches will require new mechanisms for meaning-making, new mechanisms for belonging, as well as addressing the imbalances of inequality, of lack of access. And so this will require managing worldview conflicts. It will require creating new norms. And this brings us to number 10, which was very interesting, where the participants said, in the future, society will need spaces to practice governance together. In other words, governance will have to become a social competence. And so we believe that foresight as a set of tools and methods can create that space for practicing governance together. When we get down into the issues of control over what we produce, issues of power and rules, those are the supporting capabilities of government. And then, as many of the participants before me have said, we think that the future of governance will need to be marked by issues of trust and confidence building, of course, resilience, and then very importantly, maybe the most important, number 14 there, how do we create new eco-social systems? One of the images that the participant used was this question of, imagine if the forest was seen as an essential worker
in our society? What will that mean for how we organize our society? And then finally, the question of how we involve voices in the process of governance that have to date been excluded. And we believe that only by involving those voices, we can build the trust, we can discover the new ways of being as society. And so foresight, we do believe, provides a mechanism to do some of that. Foresight is not a silver bullet, it's not the only solution, but certainly is one piece of the puzzle of creating a more resilient future. Thank you, colleagues. We do have a couple of minutes for questions, and so we'll take those from the floor. Thank you. There's a colleague on the ground. I'm not sure if we have a microphone here in the front, and we'll take some questions. What we might do is to take 2 questions, and then we'll respond. Shall we go to the front first, and then we'll come to the back? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kamsahamnida. My name is Alex Brillantes. I'm from the Eastern Regional Organization for Public Administration. One question for my colleague from Indonesia, Mr. Priadi. Kartu project, no? And I note that it's a lot of this is training. And I note in your presentation that it was really something that really reached out to the different institutions. My question is, what is the role of government? I know I was asking my colleague here, Eric, what is the role of the training institution, say LAN, Lambaga? How do they reinvent themselves? And, or are they becoming irrelevant since everything was being done online? And number 2, which relates to the future of government of Ms. Donna. When you talk about the future of government, she spoke online, no? It's really, how does government really imagine itself that really government is it becoming one, irrelevant? Is it becoming the obstacle? And we all know that sometimes government can be an enabler, but many, many times it can also be the disabler. So how do we bring all this, you know, because government is there, but at the end of the day, it cannot govern alone. How do we bring the private sector? And I think your paradigm then really talked about the importance of involving the citizens, but sometimes you and I know that sometimes citizen involvement isn't really a value in some governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shall we take the second question and then we'll respond together?
Thank you so much for giving me such an opportunity. I would like to congratulate Dubai Future Foundation. Once I have been a part of their meeting, and it is very interesting move. And my question is for Ms. Donna, government of the past versus government of the future. So, would you over-optimistic that the government of the future is more competitive and effective social contractor than the past one? My second question is just for the moderator, Dr. Marius. Among the 15 elements of the government, you said the item number 12, building trust on the government system. Is it possible, 100%? Or if it's yes, how can we build a trust in the unforeseen futures and the global arenas of the current situation of government system? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask my colleague to respond first, my colleague from Indonesia, and then I will respond.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Marius. Thank you so much for your question, Mr. Alex. Well, Kartu Prakerja basically is an ecosystem. I have mentioned earlier in the presentation, if you see the ecosystem that consists of 180 training providers there, 6 digital payments, including e-wallets and banks, actually, and then also about like job portals, 4 job portals there. So they are private sectors, but I can tell you in the ecosystem it's not just public and private partnership. We also invite universities there and also non-governmental organization. So all of them has the synergic role for the ecosystem. For government, of course, we are to regulate. We are to monitor the ecosystem. So we keep the ecosystem is running. So, and also to give the direction. In the government roles, we have the Komite Cipta Kerja as the provision of the policy, the direction, and the PMO is the executor. So we are the program implementers there. And then we, together, working with a collaboration with the partners from the private sectors and universities, we have each role. The training providers, of course, in their specialty, as I mentioned earlier, government cannot do this alone in such of limited of time. And uncertainty due to COVID-19. So we invite actually all the training providers to provide training based on their specialty. We have 12 categories from the farming, technology, management, and everything. So they provide like currently is 1,000 more trainings. And then for the payment partners, of course, we as the Kartu Prakerja has the double mission due to COVID-19 pandemic, we also perform not just the skill development program, but also a social protection program. So we use the G2P approach with the cash conditional transfer method. The program recipients that has been finished the training, they get the incentive through the mechanism of the G2P, through the payment partners, the multi-channel that we are providing, like the 2 banks and 4 digital or e-wallets. And then the job portals, they are important to bridge the information. As I mentioned perhaps earlier about how workforce is not just lack of access to the training, but also to the information on the available jobs in the market. So we cater from the supply side to the demand side. And the third one is, the last one is the NGO and universities. We're partnering with them. Why? Because government, PMO, we cannot, first, we cannot do it alone. We don't have the specialty to curation the curriculum from the wide range of sectors. So we invite the universities that has background of the education specialty to curate the curriculum from the upstream, and then after they approve, and then the training providers can provide the training in the e-marketplaces. So that is the role of the universities and NGO. So for the government, of course, again, we have to monitor for the ecosystem to be running well. So that is the part of, everyone has the part, each part, it is synergic. This is not just about Kartu Prakerja recruiting the vendor, no. We are partnering. I think this is my answer, Pak Alex. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to respond to the question of what is the role of government and then on trust, a quick story before we go to another round of questions. A friend from Australia once visited South Africa, where I live, and went on safari and saw a beautiful African elephant and decided to take a selfie with the elephant. And he came home and he looked through his photos. He wanted to show his family the wonderful African elephant, and he couldn't find the photo. And he went through the photos a second time and he couldn't find the photo. The third time, he found a photo of himself. And he realized he'd made a big mistake. He was so big in the frame that he couldn't see the elephant. And I think on this question of what is the role of government, one of the mistakes government makes is it tries to be so big in the frame, do everything, be everything, that it can't see the elephant, which is where I think my colleague is coming from with partnerships. The purpose of government is to serve society. That is why we've invented such a thing as government institutions. And so if government can make itself slightly less dominant in the frame and create room for those partners, it unlocks the strategy and the synergy and the opportunities. And this comes to the question of trust. You know, there's a lot of analysis, barometers and indexes around the world that indicate the decline of public trust. but very few that analyze the reasons for the decline in public trust. And it's actually quite simple. It's the decline in public integrity and the equality of outcomes. So in an environment where there's a lack of integrity in public institutions and where the outcome of those public institutions is not equitable, that it's quite predictable that trust will decline. And so as policymakers or public servants, what we ought to be grappling with is actually not the trust. The trust is a symptom. It's the root. It's the question of public integrity. And of course, enhancing transparency, enhancing accountability, and maybe at a cultural level, making integrity fashionable is what needs to be built once again for us to enjoy that public trust. I think we have a question over here, and then we'll have one more after that, given our time.
Thank you. My name is Anir Chaudhary, Policy Advisor, Aspire to Innovate Program, Government of Bangladesh and UNDP. We have started a program called Civil Service 2041 because our Prime Minister's vision for 2041 is the target to become a high-income country for Bangladesh. And we are imagining, so it's a reimagination program for civil service rather than a capacity building program, so to speak. And we have identified a few areas, empathy, which is design thinking, digital transformation, data literacy, fourth industrial revolution types of technologies from World Economic Forum. We're actually setting up a 4IR center in Bangladesh, and public-private partnerships. And these are going well in the curriculum. We have actually started working with all the different training academies within the government civil service. There are quite a few. But one thing that we have not had success, and we want to, is foresight. We are trying to figure out exactly what tools of foresight to actually incorporate in the curriculum and in the practice as well. On another side, we started a national intelligence platform for skills and education and employment. So we call it NICE cubed, NISC cubed. It stands for National Intelligence for Skills, Education, Entrepreneurship, and Employment. And that's where we brought in the private sector, large employers, the private associations, chambers of commerce, and also the education and skills providers within government and private sector. And they're putting in a lot of data. So we're seeing very interesting things happening. We have not been able to predict what will happen in the future, but we're seeing a lot of data coming in from different sides, the demand side and the supply side. And we're seeing some interesting things happening there. But we don't know whether to take that into foresight, exactly how to digest foresight in our curriculum and in our practice. Some guidance on that would be really helpful.
Thank you for the question. And colleagues, given time, I'm going to ask Trish if you would like to respond to this last question, and then we'll go briefly to Donna online for her response as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a really interesting question. And like I said, there's no one-size-fits-all approach about how you use foresight in your government and what you want to do and how you sort of set up those structures. The tool that you just mentioned sounds like it would be incredibly useful, but I think, you have to have the agents on the ground that can understand that message, work with the complexity within it, and be able to feed up insights and synthesis. And that's a hard task, and it requires a bit of capacity building for your organisation. And so what we found really useful is, as I spoke earlier, is that learn by doing approach of come in and find a current policy challenge that you can really sink your teeth into and get a bit of additional support to do that, to guide you through, but you don't want someone to come in and run that process and leave. You want to run that process with the ability then that you can replicate it as soon as they've gone. You could do the same thing tomorrow with a different policy and with a different group of people. So we've found that to be incredibly useful. We've done it with quite a few countries now. We come in and tackle a whole range of diverse things, but it's something that is a real policy challenge of the day. We're not just going in with hypotheticals and lovely questions that are pretty easy to answer. We're really sinking our teeth into and tackling these hard questions. And that really gives participants a real sense of the complexity of the foresight process and gives them that experience to walk through the whole process in a way that we sort of, we take on a train the trainer model. roles. So we typically work with one core group that is going to be our specialists, and we train them, and then we help them to deliver the learn by doing to their colleagues, so that, you know, they're really hands in, jump in with 2 feet. They're running the process, as I said, with the idea that they can run it the day after we leave with another group of people. So thank you.
Thank you, Trish. Donna.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions about the future of government. Look, I guess, you know, as Marius said, government has a variety of different roles, and I think one of the challenges is for government to think through those different types of roles. So the role as an enabler, the role as a regulator, the role as a service provider, but thinking through the balance between these different roles. Also, I think taking a very honest perspective about the capacity and capability within government to fulfill each of these different types of roles. Because I think we can see certainly that some governments may take a more ambitious role as a regulator, but not have the capability and capacity to really adequately fulfill that role. So I think it requires a sense of honesty within government to think about what can we realistically do and perform that role to, you know, an effective level, to be both not to be an obstacle. And I think in many instances, governments are all of those words that you talked about. They sometimes are irrelevant. They sometimes are enablers. They are sometimes obstacles. But I think having a balance between those things is one of the important things for government to think about. Where can we best add value? And as a number of other presenters have talked about, how can we best partner with others? Because these are not efforts that government are in this on their own. And in fact, government on its own cannot do a lot of these things that we're talking about. So they need to partner with the private sector, with communities, with citizens, with the whole range of stakeholders who are within this environment, and to be able to leverage off each other. And in some instances, that will require government to step back, which often for some governments, that is a challenge, to accept that they need to step back and let others step into this space. But I think that goes in many ways to the sophistication of a government who is prepared to be able to do that. And just a quick comment on the government of the past, government of the future picture. It is a little cheeky of us, I guess, to put forward these two visions as if they are a choice of either or. I think with every government, we can see parts of government of the past and parts of government of the future. What we would like to see is more government of the future and less government of the past overall. And I think then we would see governments who do have this more dynamic and constructive social contract with their citizens, which obviously ebbs and flows over time as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And colleagues, would you join me in thanking our excellent panel? Appreciate your inputs, and thank you to the organizers.
Thank you, Marius, and all the speakers online and in person. So this is the end of thematic session 2. Special session 2 on strengthening risk-informed governance and resilience in cities will start at 10:35. So we'll have a break until 10:35. So you can come to the room at 10:35. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, for the special session 2. Now, I would like to invite the moderator for this session, Her Excellency Sayana Kavasuren, Ambassador of Mongolia to Bulgaria. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second special session where we will be focusing on strengthening risk-informed governance and resilience in cities and local communities for climate change. And we have 6 outstanding speakers present here, 2 of them personally, thank you very much. And we have 4 who will be making their presentation online. And before we proceed to the first speaker, I would like to quote the ministerial declaration which was made in 2021 at the high-level political forum for sustainable development, which called on the actions to promote all-inclusive governance, to make sure that we tackle the issues of climate change and achieving sustainable development goals with the inclusion of the governments and with the strengthening the governments at all levels. And with a particular focus today, we are talking about local cities and local communities. We are the main recipients of what we are working together. And with that, I would like to proceed to present our first speaker. Mr. Samuel Dana, who works as an associate capacity development expert with the United Nations Project Office on Governance, which is a part of the Division of Public Institutions and Digital Governance at UN DESA. Samuel, who holds a PhD from Yonsei University in Public Administration, was engaged with the Ministry of the Local Development and Rural Development of Ghana on community development. So will be very important for us to listen to his insights on how he believes that the risk-informed governance can lead to strengthening disaster risks and resilience in local level. Please, the floor is yours, Samuel.
Thank you, Your Excellency Sayana. Sorry for the mishap in pronouncing your name. And I'm very pleased to be here to continue with this very important symposium, which is one of the flagship programs of UN DESA. And I would like to once again welcome each one of you to this session. I know issues about disasters are very key and dear to our hearts, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. And it's something that we cannot run away from. So my presentation, or the presentation that I would like to quickly go through with you, is going to focus on how do we strengthen risk-informed governance, how do you strengthen disaster risk reduction and resilience through risk-informed governance. I know the concept of risk-informed governance is something that has always been there, but we are trying to throw more light on how we can make our governance system more risk-informed. Okay, so this particular presentation is going to be derived from a recent publication, a policy brief that our office published on the UN DESA's policy brief series, which was part of the policy brief series, and this policy brief number 139. So it's accessible on the website. When I get to that point, I would like to just show you where you can find it. And it's something that is a recent finding, or it's a recent knowledge collection that we put together. This is how the presentation is going to look like. We want to look at the global trends of emerging and ongoing disasters, and also look at what risk-informed governance is all about, as well as we also look at why risk-informed governance is important and what are some of the challenges impeding the process of strengthening risk-informed governance, and what are some of the policy recommendations going forward, or what can we do about this. So this is the policy brief on our website, or UNDESA's website. It can be featured in this way, and this the photo you may find there, just to familiarize with it. So we want you to go there, read it, or go through it, critique it, give us some of your feedback so that it will be part of a way we can learn from it. So this policy brief specifically contributes to SDG 9, SDG 11, 13, 16, and Goal 17 on partnerships and goals. So globally, issues about disasters have been on a rapid increase. I think using the word rapid is even an understatement, because every common second we have disasters coming our way, and the intensity is increasing day by day and per every second we have. And the graph on the top right shows that it's just a data showing that disasters have increased almost doubled in the recent 2 decades compared to the previous 4 decades. And it's something that we must find so alarming. I know those who have just returned from the COP have discussed some of this into details, and it's good we further share them and discuss them at this juncture. Global temperatures are rising so rapidly, and it's expected to go to rise above 3.2 degrees Celsius by 2100. And this is something that policymakers and practitioners and everybody alike is very alarmed, including us, about. As of August 2021, the IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in this report issued a code red for humanity, and something that depicts danger, looking at the current rate at which things are moving. And it's expected that whilst temperatures are moving, everybody gets affected. But one thing is that people in small island developing states, even though their contribution towards this climate change issues is minute compared to other growing or more stronger economies or more stronger societies. But what happens is that they are disproportionately more affected compared to others. So the objective of the policy brief or the paper was just to examine how can we best strengthen disaster risk reduction through risk-informed governance. And this is a framework that was adopted to guide the findings. So it's good we understand what disasters are. It's good we provide more inclusive risk management systems or governance system. How do we increase investments into mitigating risks, as well as how do we make our preparedness measures more responsive and rapid? Let's make it more anticipatory going forward. So risk-informed governance and resilience are very much related, and resilience is how can we best prepare to be able to respond or absorb risks even before they happen, and how do we adapt and recover in a timely manner. So that's where we talk about being able to real-time disaster management systems. So risk-informed governance, not just focusing about now, we focus about what can even happen in future. How do we better anticipate looking at this? And it looks at an integrated approach where we don't just focus on one area, we look at all segments of society and how we can make it work better. And this will better require that we have strong governance systems. We should be able to have good laws and policies in place. We should be able to have strong leadership as well as institutions that are well coordinated, not just working in silos, but they should be well coordinated. And roles and responsibilities of responsible citizens should be clearly allocated and making everybody responsible for what they do. And we should, in the end, whilst we're promoting inclusiveness, we should as well promote accountability in the process going forward. So risk-informed governance is very important. The 2030 agenda specifically mentions issues about disaster risk reduction, and it's a cross-cutting issue in the SDGs. And the other one is that COVID-19 further came to highlight this, or why we really have to look at this. And the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction calls for all governments and nations to move towards risk-informed system. But whilst we try to encourage and promote this importance, we find that many of us, or all countries, none is perfect anyway, but most countries are challenged in many ways. Issues about ineffective leadership, issues about capacities, competencies, weak institutional coordination, inadequate disaster preparedness measures, as well as how countries are able to integrate the global goals into their country situation. And based on these challenges identified, we try to propose some policy measures. And this is what it is. It comes in. So governments should be able to promote more effective public governance system that integrates risk-informed governance system into their disaster management strategies. Secondly, there should be sound policy making is something that should be very much fostered, and there should be increased investment into disaster risk reduction and resilience, whilst trying to mobilize innovative financing to be able to address this. And there should be more focus on building resilient infrastructure. I know there is always this idea, there's infrastructure gap, but when it comes to doing that, infrastructural systems should be able to focus on addressing risks or being able to withstand risks. And strategies should be focused on promoting resilience and disaster risk. We should leverage innovative or government innovation and frontier technologies that have proven to be something very important for preventing, responding, mitigating disasters. And in the end, we should be able to build capacities and change our mindsets. That is not just for public officials and governments as we are, but we should, even among citizens, who are the major people or the main people who bear the brunt in this. So in the end, risk-informed governance is something important, and I welcome and invite everyone to be an ambassador of risk-informed governance. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Samuel, and thank you for sharing your insights on the most important factors which would lead to the effective risk-informed governance, highlighting the importance of the inclusiveness in the decision-making, accountability of the engaged institutions and political leadership and commitment. And also, most importantly, the issue which you mentioned about the importance of the risk preparedness, which is enshrined in the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which must be at the core of all decisions we work on the risk-informed governance. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to proceed to the next speaker, who is very dear to my heart because I've been working with Sanjaya Bhatia for more than 7 years on the Making Cities Resilience to come to Mongolia, and he brings the very extensive experience working with the international community and global governments, and contributing to the capacity building of more than 17,000 global government leaders. And with his contribution in capacity to develop international recovery platform, he also made very important contribution to develop guidelines for recovery and capacity building program for disaster risk reduction. I would like to give a floor for Sanjay to make a presentation on digital platforms and technology application for disaster risk reduction. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Sayana, and thank you, participants, for this opportunity. So I'll just talk a bit about, firstly, start with what is the human cost of disasters, and you see the economic losses also, but the human losses also. Why this slide is important is because it's shown in every conference. Everybody knows these numbers. Samuel just showed it a while ago, something similar. The interesting thing about it is that we are numb to it. So we see these numbers and conference after conference, and it, nobody actually reacts. So that's why I think this slide is important, because the numbers are just growing. Of course, there is, we have a number of frameworks, so we can't say we don't know what to do. We have all these frameworks, and they've been with us since 2015. And they didn't come out of the blue. They came out of pre-existing frameworks. So to claim ignorance about what to do, well, we can't say that. We have this, and plus many other frameworks available. Now, when we talk about because this symposium is talking about the digital transformation. So again, I just wanted to show or highlight some of the issues that we have, because we have good ideas. We have innovative mechanisms often in place. But sometimes we are not thorough in seeing how this implementation can actually happen. as I say, the nuts and bolts. So digital divide, we all know, and it is due to all of these reasons, as you can see. And when we talk about applying technology for helping us to implement SDGs and reducing disaster and climate risks, we need to address this issue, because if we don't, we have a huge chunk of the world's population left out, and they become the most vulnerable, and then they are deprived of the benefits. So there is one very interesting example we found of how a small city in California is trying to cover this digital divide. So what they do is the city gives the 5G license for the 5G poles construction, and a part of that fee is kept in a digital inclusion fund. So it's a very simple means of collecting some extra revenue, and then using that money to give to civil society organizations to expand programs on internet access, awareness campaigns, digital literacy, and so on. I'll give you another example in Korea. As you know, the transformation and the move for application of technology has been very, very rapid. Happened all over last 20 years or so. And the senior citizens, they did not have experience with smartphones and all. So what the telecom companies have done, they have digital literacy programs specifically targeting senior citizens to help them understand how to use a smartphone, what are the apps, what are the safeguards, what are the benefits, everything. And then they are able to firstly to operate a smartphone, and then they are able to access all the technologies and the apps that are available. So again, something to think about as we go forward with digital inclusion. So we've been researching a lot on applications of technology for reducing the disaster and climate risk. And sometimes it's simple applications. So here, there is a flood forecasting and warning system, which is autonomous. So it's focused on the riverbeds, it's watching the water flow, and then automatically is able to issue warnings or flags about the level rises. And it's not just, of course, in Korea, but it has been expanded. It's there in Philippines, in Vietnam, in Laos, PDR. So it's a technology which is usable, scalable, being used around the world. There is another very interesting technology which is picking up all over the world, which is known as the SafeNet, or PSLTE, which means Public Safety Long-Term Evolution. So the challenge that all of us face is we have different agencies responsible for different tasks, especially during an emergency. And they all have their own equipment, they all have their bandwidths, they all have their own frequencies on which they work. And there is no sharing of information even when the emergency is unfolding. So here what they have managed to do is bring together the fire, police, electricity, medical, Coast Guard, military, local government, everyone together on the same platform. And this platform is very powerful. It's based on 5G, and it allows sharing of audio, video, data, and all kinds of information real time, so that all the agencies which are directly involved in the response or indirectly involved in the response and later in the recovery, they are all on the same page, they all have the same information, and they are able to coordinate better. Another interesting app that was used and is here in Korea is the self-quarantine management system for COVID. So many of you may know, Korea never had a lockdown, never. And yet the numbers were very much controlled. And that was due to tracking, tracing, and through self-quarantine. So what the system does is, because there are limited management officers, right? There are limited officers officials who can coordinate and monitor how many people are quarantined and what is happening. So they had the app which is linked to your phone, and then all the information is available on one screen for the case officer. So one case officer can manage hundreds of people through this app, because it sends the automatic flags. If the person's phone is not responding, it lets the case officer know, so they can send somebody there to check what's happening, and so on. And this is what it looks like, the screen of the case officer. So all the cases are listed there, and then it shows the health conditions and the quarantine conditions and so on. Then another is for citizens to be part of reporting to the government about hazards, about risks. So again, there is an app in Korea. There's also an app in Jakarta and many other places in the world, where citizens can report incidents, but they can also get real-time information on their smartphone about floods, accidents, or any other issue. So that's the kind of the map that the citizens can see. Then they can zoom in, they can see their area, they can see what's happening, and anything else. In Paraguay, we found a very interesting application between the Ministry of Health and the Space Agency. So what they did was they shared data. Again, something which is not so common, unfortunately. So these two agencies, they entered a kind of an MOU to share data, and the Space Agency helped them monitor with the health data. They helped them monitor malaria, COVID, dengue, Zika, etc. So this is again an example of collaboration, when collaboration happens between two different agencies and different institutions, that it can help a lot. Another example is the Central Asia flood early warning system, which is transboundary, so includes these countries, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, and so on. And it's a transboundary system monitoring the river flows, because rivers are not bound by physical boundaries or political boundaries, and helps them to monitor their flood situation and also anticipate. I think the last example here is where the USA, 9,900 flood gauges, all online. So people can access the data, they can see what's happening, and they can get early warning well in time. So with these examples, just to show some good innovations, I leave you at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Give a warm round of applause to Sanjay. And thank you for pointing out on the recent pandemics of the COVID-19, which showed that the digital platforms and applications are very important tools for us to be prepared to ensure that the public services are well delivered to our people, and information which they require to make risk-informed decisions at all levels, not only by the citizen, but also local governments, are very important. And the issue of the digital inclusion with the consideration of the specific needs of the recipients is very essential, and I hope that during the course of our discussions we will also see some new highlights on that area. Thank you very much once again. And I would like to invite and give a floor to our next speaker who is joining us online, Mr. Rajiv Garg, who is the Regional Manager of Africa and West Asia and CIS countries in Center, excuse me, so many papers, at the Climate Technology Center and Network, which is headquarters in Copenhagen, Denmark. His presentation will center on enhancing climate resilience excuse me, and the use of innovative technologies in government for resilient societies and local communities. And I would like to also recognize the 27 years experience of Mr. Garg on the developing the technologies with the concentration on the climate change. And I would like to give a floor to Mr. Garg, please.
Thank you, Her Excellency. I hope that I am audible and to all, loud and clear. If I can get
clear, we hear you.
Yeah,
very
thank
well.
you, thank you, Her Excellency. You know, I straight away jump into my presentation, the Climate Technology Center and Network. It's an institution which is created under the Climate Convention, with the main objective to support the developing countries on climate technologies or on climate technology transfer. We have been in operations for the last 8 or 9 years, and in these years we have served more than 109 countries, and all of these are developing countries on various technology-related requests. Our experience have been that halting or preventing the spiral increase in disaster by addressing the key drivers, root cause, and multiple interconnected risks is paramount to tackling the climate crisis. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, but the question here is, up to what extent can we enhance climate resilience in cities and local communities through innovative technologies? Technologies plays a very important role, and that's why the Climate Convention has created this mechanism, which is the technology mechanism. CTCN is an implementation arm of the technology mechanism with a mandate to support transfer of technologies in developing countries. Next slide, please. Means just a brief slide on what the CTCN does, what is the mandate, and what is the value proposition of the CTCN. You know, first of all, the CTCN provides, it's the only body under the UN Convention which supports exclusively on technologies, on technology implementation. Secondly, we focused on a demand-driven approach. The countries are best to know what they want. It is not a top-down approach that this is a technology you have to implement it or any other agenda, but it is more of a demand-driven, a country-driven approach. The important thing is tailoring of technology. Technologies are available. Technologies are available to all people know about it, but it is the application of the technology which matters. And the application of technology can be in various areas. The same technology can be applied for one condition, one set of conditions. The same technology can be modified a bit and can be applied in another set of conditions. Definitely, when we are talking about technologies, it's also about creating economic opportunities. And we in the CTCN, we have a kind of a network of institutions, more than 750 network of institutions, and we engage with them and create these economic opportunities in the countries as well as within the network. We do support the entire government of the technology cycle, starting from collaborative research and development up to final deployment of technologies using various financial mechanisms. And definitely there is a great focus on gender and youth. Next slide, please. Means we have been talking about the role of digital technologies, etc. But there are two important things, and this has been highlighted in the new program of work of the CTCN, which has been accepted by all the parties, which has been endorsed by all the parties, and we are going to begin work on it from 2023 to 2027 for the next 5 years. Means there are 5 core areas where in the new program of work is going to focus on. Means definitely one is water, food, energy nexus, build resilient building and infrastructure, sustainable mobility, energy systems, and business and industry. But more important than these 5 transformative areas which were identified by the parties themselves is the role of the 2 enablers. Means the 2 enablers, the digitalization and the national systems of innovation, have been identified as 2 major enablers which are going to be used to bring about transformative change in the 5 core areas which I have mentioned before. And this is very important. Means specifically for the LDCs, for the states where there is less absorptive capacity, where there is less capacity, it's very easy to go and say the technology transfer has happened. It is very easy to go and install a technology, but how it is going to be maintained, how it is going to be improvised, how it is going to be, further scaled up. And for that, definitely you need national systems. And specifically, if you are focusing on innovation, and specifically innovation of technologies, then you need to have a national systems of innovation, which is going to scale up the efforts or multiply the efforts in the longer run. Next slide, please. From here on, I'll show you certain application of technologies which the CTCN has implemented in different countries. And these are largely digital technologies, and how we have combined digital technologies with the local information to bring the best of the planning or to develop planning tools and provided built capacity in the countries to start using this tool. Again, in Eswatini, we developed this tool, but in this tool, what we did was that for the first time in Eswatini, we used the unmanned aerial vehicle, that is the drone, to map an area and superimpose the images which we got through these drones to the satellite imagery from Earth observation satellite, and have a kind of a micro analysis done over an area and did a kind of an adaptation planning. So this is for the first time the tool was used. Next slide, please. Again, in Mali, means information systems is important, but the information should reach the person who is in need of it most. And this is specifically true for the farming community. They sometimes get information about weather forecast, which is a month in advance, but that is again not at a level where which is very helpful for the farmers. Therefore, what we did in Mali was develop a kind a information system, and this information system was focused on a specific crop. It was focused on a specific crop. We used bulletins and SMS messages. So we developed a kind of a platform which can send messages to farmers who have subscribed to it, and that gives information about specific crops. And here we started with millet because that was the most important crop for the farmers. So again, a kind of a information system or a tool which was developed based on digital technologies, and this was in local language, so that the farmers really understood and made use of this system. Next slide, please. Again, in Sudan, again we used the unmanned aerial vehicles or drones to map an area just for soil erosion, and this was again what we did was, using the drone, we mapped the area, and we also collected information through the Earth observation satellite. And what we did was that, using these two data, we did a kind of a ground truthing by taking samples and then correlating the characteristics of the soil with the UAV data which we have got. And using that, we developed a kind of a predictive model on the areas where soil could be eroded, or which has the danger of land degradation, and developed a tool which provides information to the government officials on the various actions they need to be taken. So again, it was on the use of unmanned aerial vehicles. We did that. Next slide, please. Means again, a very smart way of avoiding disaster is to plan better. And we know this. My previous two presenters have presented on those lines. What we are doing in Togo, again, just as an example, that we are trying to work and conceptualize a framework of climate smart municipalities. And this is done in close collaboration with the civil society and the local stakeholders. So what we did was conducted assessment of vulnerability of the landscape and proposed a model for transformation of 4 municipalities out of the 10. And we said that for the 6 of it, you can replicate the model. And what very important point is integrating the technologies. I mean, when you talk about smart technologies, it has to be integrated. That is, your energy production needs to be integrated. Your mobility, transport system needs to be integrated. Waste, land cover, and agriculture information, etc. All needs to be integrated at a local, at least at a provincial level. Next slide, please. Again, I was talking about technology application. This is a kind of a application which we did in Burundi. Now, this technology is called a slam dunk technology. In the West, specifically in Europe, this technology is used to prevent floods because it is put on the side of the rivers, on the embankments, and inflated so that the flood water do not spill over the banks. What we did was that we took this technology to Burundi, and in Burundi we use it as not only as a flood control system, but as a water storage system, because during floods in Burundi, in that specific area, you get more water than required, and means it is a flood. But during the lean season, there is a drought. And therefore, we are using this technology not only to store water, but also to reuse water when required. And this, so a kind of a different application from the traditional application which it has been applied to. Next slide, please. Well, we are also in the CTCN is also implementing a GEF pilot project. And again, whenever we are talking about technologies and adaptation technologies, we innovative financing is the most important thing. So we are working in 3 countries globally, just as a pilot and a test case, and to see what kind of business models can be developed around adaptation technologies, specifically in the LDC and the SID context. So we are working in Mozambique, we are working in Lao PDR, and we are working and we are working in the Caribbean island, one of the Caribbean island, English in Antigua and Barbados. So out of this, tools would be developed, which are planning tools would be developed, which are going to be used by the municipal authorities. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is same, and this was my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and please give a warm round of applause to Mr. Gag. And thank you for sharing the importance of the outreaching to the those in need of specific technologies to improve their practices at a local level, and talking about a demand-driven approach when we're talking about the development of the technologies. And thank you for sharing with the examples of different countries, and especially it was very interesting to learn about the technologies on the smart, climate smart municipalities. Hopefully one of the following questions will be touching upon those initiatives. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to proceed to the next speaker, and who will be talking about on the importance of infrastructure asset management for sustainable development goals. And he is the excellent speaker to talk about this topic, because he will be speaking from his experience of more than 20 years working with the United Nations intergovernmental processes, research and analysis, and in the development of United Nations Development Agenda with a focus on infrastructure finance. And with that, I would like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Daniel Platts, a Senior Economic Affairs Officer of United Nations DESA's Division of Financing for Sustainable Development Office in United Nations in New York. The floor is all yours, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Excellency. I hope you can hear me well, and I'm just gonna try to share my screen here. 1 second. I'm gonna go into presentation mode. Just minimizing a few windows. Okay, so again, thank you so much. Excellency, as you said, I'm going to speak about a new capacity development initiative, or relatively new capacity development initiative at the UN. It is done jointly by UNDESA, UNCDF, the United Nations Capacity Development Fund, and UNOPS, United Nations Office of Project Services. And this is a good group to do this, because you know, we're coming sort of from the SDG financing angle here from my division in DESA. UNCDF works very closely with local governments around the world, and UNOPS, of course, has also a very practical on the ground experience with infrastructure. And when I talk about infrastructure asset management, before I continue, I should say thank you, first of all, also for having us, of course, and thank you again for the organizers, DESA, the Ministry and Metropolitan Authority of Incheon. When I talk about infrastructure asset management, it's not a new concept, but the way it is framed, or when we call it infrastructure asset management, that's relatively new. And the idea is really to make sure that the public sector understands infrastructures as an asset throughout their life cycle. What do I mean with infrastructure assets? Well, these are physical things of value that provide public service to the community. And what does it mean to manage them? To manage them means really to monitor and maintain these things of value. So it's quite a complex process to do this, and it includes balancing risks, costs, opportunities, and performance. And it is something that around the world, typically local governments do. There are central government agencies, of course, like road authorities, or sometimes the water and sanitation sector is managed also at the national level. But at some level or another, the local governments, regions, provinces, municipalities, cities are involved in managing these assets, or at the very least, they're being held responsible for these assets when they're not working, right? So we at UNDESA and with our partners realized in about 2016, 2017, that this is really an area that is neglected. I would almost refer to it as a neglected piece of the local development finance puzzle. And what it means really is that it is done, but it's done in a very piecemeal way. Sorry, some of my slides are not moving. Here we go. So I usually start out talking about infrastructure asset management by giving people three numbers, because numbers are easy to remember, right? And no one will argue probably with the first number, that over 90% of the SDGs and their targets are directly or indirectly linked to infrastructure. This is actually part of a scientific study that was done by our partners UNOPS with Oxford University, where they really very closely and in detail looked at every little target and how it corresponds and links with infrastructure. There are statistics out there that at least 2% of GDP growth are at stake when infrastructure is under-maintained. And then the last number is perhaps something that people don't know all that much. I didn't know it before I went into this area, that up to 85%, usually it's between 70 and 85% when you look at all assets, up to 85% though of infrastructure costs actually occur after the construction phase. And we see a lot of focus in the SDG discussions, in the financing the SDGs discussions on that first phase. How can we invest into large scale infrastructure? But very little focus on the, what happens after the ribbon cutting, not only with maintaining it, but the cost that incurs. So it's actually a very big economic and financial question to look at this. So what we've done a year or two ago, it came out, we worked on with many experts from different areas, most of them engineers, but some of them are also local government, finance officials. We worked out a UN handbook on infrastructure asset management that is very simply drafted. It is, the material is complex, but what we try to do is to find a language, and we worked with local government officials on that, to find a language that local government officials around the world, are not bored by, can relate to, and we know that they're very, very busy, but we try to really speak to them. That handbook is now available in all 6 UN languages and in 4 or 5 local languages. And usually when we go into a new country, first thing we do is translate it, because we know, a lot of things get lost in translations. There are many things in the handbook. It's quite comprehensive, 400 pages, but it's very action-oriented. And I wanted to focus here in this presentation very briefly on the part on resilience and climate change, because that's what we're talking about. Before I do that, just to advertise that we have very easily to access online learning opportunities, completely free, of course. We do online learning and live events. We do asynchronous learning through MOOCs. We have hybrid events, and we do a lot of field support currently in about 10 countries around the world. Our approach, in order to understand how we talk about resilience, when we talk about assets, we really talk about 2 things. We talk about life cycle management and portfolio management. And what that means is that local government officials should understand that all the assets that they are investing into have to have a life cycle, and they need to function over that life cycle. And each phase of that life cycle has different properties, and it would be important to understand them, right? So typically we talk about the planning phase, the acquiring phase, the using phase, and then the dispose phase. The use phase is the longest one, of course. And often the planning phase is misunderstood. People think sometimes, the planning and the acquire, or planning even also is a very, very expensive phase. And then in the end, sort of, expenditures go down. It is the most important phase, the planning phase, because all the mistakes you make there, you have to live with afterwards, right? But it's certainly not the most expensive phase. But it pays to really pay attention to this phase, right? And through better asset management, you could change the cost curves you see here a little bit. You can flatten them, but we go into that in the handbook, but we don't have time for that here. Portfolio management is really a very, very difficult challenge that all local governments are facing. With very, very limited budgets, they need to take a very tough decision on what to fix first. And you need to make trade-offs, right? And so what we're doing there is really developing decision-making tools on how to prioritize, how to define a priority asset, and how to define risk, and then how to take action in a sensible manner, given your very, very limited resources. Here's an example. What do you do as a local government when you have land? that you may want to sell, and you might want to use those funds to upgrade a solid waste collection system or build a new school, and what kind of considerations should go in there in order for you to make that decision. It's a complicated decision, and we try to walk local governments through certain scenarios that can hopefully make it a little easier to understand. The climate and infrastructure chapter of this handbook is also, took a long time to decide on the content, but even longer to structure it and to find a good language. And what we've seen, and I've seen it here too, we see a very a wealth of innovative ideas and very, very inspiring solutions out there. In addition to that, what matters though is also to really find a common language on risk and really find a very simple decision-making framework that local government officials can walk through. And this is currently, what we're using at the very, I'm only showing part of it, but what is important to understand here is that at the very beginning, you think about the hazards. You think about the hazards of certain forces, right? Like climate change. What is the impact? Once you have the impact, you think about your vulnerability to that impact, and vulnerability depends on your exposure and your adaptive capacity. And once you think you are vulnerable, then you look at risk, right? You look at what is the likelihood of the event happening and the implication of failure and so forth. So in the context of climate change and local government, we really spent quite some time to walk local governments through that decision-making framework, because sometimes you don't need to take action, sometimes you do need to take action, and to make that very, very consequential decision is not easy if you don't use common language that is easily understood. So as a result of this training, what we usually do is we ask local governments to design a multi-year asset management action plan. Again, very easily structured. There's a template, there's a writing guide. It's available in many different languages. And the whole purpose of the training that we do usually is to design one action plan for only one priority asset. And then we try to work with local governments over the next few years and see where implementation is lagging. And we're still learning, of course. So far, we have 150 local governments around the world that are in the implementation phase of these asset management action plans. And I should specify, when we talk about local governments, we need the endorsement from the mayor. We need, high-level endorsement, of course. But what we're really doing is talking to the technical officials that, run the city on a day-to-day basis, right? And asset management is really a multi-stakeholder effort. So usually you bring together the engineer from key sectors. We bring together the procurement officer, the community development officer, very important, right? And they have different titles and names, of course, in different local governments, but the functions are usually very, very similar. What is also, and this is sort of second to last slide, what is also important is to look at the national level, of course. And what we've seen is that there's a disconnect often where local governments see the importance, the urgency of resilient infrastructure asset management, but often at the national level, there are no enabling policies in place. The institutional, regulatory, legislative environment is not right. And change we see the most where we bring local and national governments together and to find a common language. And in the case of Uganda, Tanzania, now Nepal as well, we're thinking now with governments there on what it means to put in place an asset management policy at the national level that gives very clear and direct guidance. So in closing, just wanted to introduce you to this sort of more basic project, right? But firmly addressed at local governments around the world. Invite you to let us know what you think. There are online learning activities, of course, for your clients as well. The global repository of action plans is open and public, and we always encourage local governments to contribute to that. And of course, we have networks, ongoing networks, and we can also look into concrete requests for technical assistance. And I'm sure there are many areas where we can work together within the UN system. Thank you so much for your attention. That's it.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It was very important subject you mentioned, because the public financing is one of the important issues. And when you say that 90% of the targets of the Sendai framework touch upon the management of the infrastructure assessment, it's also about the direct and indirect impact of our initiatives and our projects, and the risks which we face when we talk about the disaster risk preparedness. And also, I would like to highlight the importance of your point when you said that it's all about the multi-stakeholders engagement, because management on the infrastructure assets, it's a cross-sectoral approach, because it covers not only, as we could see, the physical presence of the matter, but it's also about the indirect impact on other aspects of the livelihood of local communities. Thank you very much, Daniel. And before I proceed to introduce our next speaker, I also would like to bring to your attention that you are welcomed to put your questions online. And also, I would like to request our speakers to adhere to the limit of 10 minutes, so we will have more opportunities to exchange information with our audience on and offline. Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Dr. R.J. Kawada, who works as a manager of the Earth Science Division of NASA in the United States. And as an expert on atmospheric and climate science, Dr. R.J. has been leading the NASA's efforts to extend uses of earth science research and applications to promote sustainable development. And with this experience, Dr. R.J. will be talking about the role of the public sector in creating awareness and monitoring hazards for disaster risks to build resilient societies and local communities. Dr. R.J., the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I see you have my slides up, so wonderful. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So hello from the United States, Washington, D.C. here. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. And so as our moderator highlighted, I'll be presenting to you some of the work that we've been doing at NASA, and also in working with a number of interagency and international organizations to promote the use of earth science observations and insights to support sustainable development and the sustainable development goals, and also promote disaster risk reduction and resilience as part of these efforts. And so we can go to the next slide, please. And so starting from here, I want to highlight that we've looked at a lot of these interconnected, especially many of the post-2015 global sustainability frameworks. And so we've examined and analyzed how Earth observations, models, and derived information can really support country-based efforts to better monitor and create more coherent narratives of their progress toward achieving sustainability and sustainable development. And so we've identified a lot of opportunities that exist to help leverage and use earth science information and insights through both improving observations and modeling capabilities, but also working hand in hand with users and stakeholders to really enable the most benefits that this information can offer. And if we go to the next slide, I'm just sharing some of the examples of Earth observations that are really provided from global scale to regional and local scale. And so Earth observations, and so by that we mean observations from space, but also from airborne platforms, in addition to ground-based observations and even observations that citizens, regular people, non-scientists are making, provide and help provide this synoptic view of our planet, which is critical to understand how the different components of the Earth system work. And so this is also critical for understanding changes that can be either natural or human caused changes. And so NASA, in addition to many other international space agencies and organizations around the world, help put this information to work. And so here again, you see some of these examples of different types of Earth observations that relate to the atmosphere, to the sea surface height, precipitation, global temperature, active fires, and other relevant variables. So if we go to the next slide, then perhaps you have to, let's see if the video will start. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so here you can see some of so the many missions that NASA operates. And so many times when people think about NASA, they think of the moon and Mars. Most people are not always aware that today NASA operates 25 missions that are orbiting our planet and observe our planet, with another 11 missions currently being in planning, in formulation and acquisition. And so in addition, a lot of, so this also involves a lot of international collaboration. And so NASA also participates in different international organizations like the Group on Earth Observations, the Committee on Earth Observations satellites, contributing to the coordination of civil space Earth observation programs and promoting the exchange of data in Earth science applications to help, again, maximize the benefits from this data and to inform decisions for a more risk-resilient future and societies. Let's go to the next slide, please. And so you may, if possible, if you could click to start the video on this slide, there should be, if you hover over the image, there should be a video if it doesn't start automatically. And so this, if it does work, if the animation works, it shows you really that Earth is an integrated system. And so we're looking at it really from as an integrated system and trying to understand its different components and how those work together. Because we realize that just like the human body, the Earth system comprises these different parts or components that really interact with each other. And so trying to study and understand how changes in the ocean may affect and influence the Earth's weather patterns and how that can impact water availability, and then that can affect changes on land and plant growth, is really important to help both better prepare us for changes that may be coming from climate variability and change, or also help us better prepare and respond to different types of hazards, and also improve resilience of our communities to those hazards. And so let's go to the next slide, please. So quickly, I want to highlight a couple of international initiatives that NASA leads or participates in that really focus again on advancing the use of space and other types of observations for sustainable development. And so this is an international initiative, the EO for SDG, or Earth Observations for Sustainable Development Goals. And this initiative really brings together not only space agencies and research networks, but national and local governments, academia, non-profit organizations, and the private sector to help really apply Earth observations to improve monitoring and tracking of specific development targets and indicators, but also inform better management decisions, resource allocation efforts. And also another aspect of this work is really working with countries to develop skills and capacities to use the data to better, again, support decisions and derive benefits. And so a lot of members include city governments, like cities in Greece, the city of Thessaloniki or the city of Johannesburg in South Africa. We have space agencies from Japan's Aerospace and Exploration Agency, other national level governments like the National Office of Statistics in Colombia, or the United Arab Emirates Statistics Office, in addition to UN entities like UN Human Settlements Program, UN Environment, among others. So again, it's a very dynamic group, and I invite you to visit the website, and also if you're on social media, you can look for us in social media and find out more about how you can get involved in some of these efforts. Let's go to the next slide, please. And so now I want to highlight some efforts that have been going on to help really improve resilience and sustainability at the local level, starting from this Earth Observations Toolkit for Sustainable Cities and Human Settlements. So this is an effort that NASA, with many other contributors and this EU4SDG initiative, spearheaded with the UN Habitat Program to really help bring together integrated data, including grid population product, poverty maps, high resolution building footprints, and other such data sets, methods, and also use cases to help really share how cities and national level government agencies around the world are leveraging this information to support a number of different efforts and also address challenges, including hazard risk mapping, climate impacts, refugee and conflict monitoring, among other areas. And so this work has really also been enabling a lot of city-to-city learning and exchange. And also we've been working on pairing earth scientists and practitioners with city governments to help, again, apply earth observations to, for example, develop and characterize urban heat exposure maps, or to look at aspects and evaluate health benefits of green and cooling infrastructures. And so again, if you go to the next slide, you can see some of this community that has been developing, and also the focus has been really on strengthening capacity of that community to really help leverage Earth observations, again, to inform sustainable cities and human settlements. I do invite you to visit the link at eutoolkit.unhabitat.org, and you can find there a lot of information. You can offer feedback. We are currently developing some step-by-step guides that can help further provide simple guidance on how to use many of the data and tools, and you can also get involved. Let's go to the next slide, please. So another activity that I wanted to highlight has been another international, again, effort with NASA and many other agency contributions has been this Earth Observation Risk Toolkit that is hosted by the UN Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, under its new portal site on risk information exchange. And so this toolkit provides disaster risk reduction users with access to open source Earth observation use cases, tools, and services to fill knowledge gaps on hazards, vulnerabilities, and exposure at country level. And so there are a few use cases currently highlighted in this toolkit. Some of them focus on early warnings around floods and droughts. And we are currently in the process of further developing this activity. If you go to the next slide, we're highlighting here one of those use cases. And so this has been how a forecasting tool has helped reduce storm loss and damage in Honduras. And so in this case, the government of Honduras has been able to leverage this forecasting tool developed by the Global Water Sustainability Initiative to better inform and forecast the estimated volume of one of the hurricanes, Hurricane Iota's runoff, to help determine, again, their water management strategy. And so this tool provides a number of data and information, including river flow data. It also provides forecasts, and it provides a 40+ year historical simulation. And so that information, again, can be used to help really inform decisions like the one made by the government of Honduras with respect to helping avoid extreme flows as a result of the hurricane, and in that way helping improve and avoid socioeconomic losses in the affected region there. Another example, if we go to the next slide, and I have a couple of more examples before I finish. So I wanted to also highlight briefly, going to another part of the world and focusing on West Africa. So a lot of the activities here have been focusing on supporting sustainable development goals through improving capacity to help again leverage Earth observations to better assess changes in water-related ecosystems. And so this has been through the NASA's and USAID Surveyor program. And so, for example, one of these activities has been focusing on assessing changes in mangrove forested areas. And so, as many of you may know, mangroves can really help mitigate risks of disasters. And so ensuring the conservation and rehabilitation of mangrove ecosystems can really help protect against effects of hazards and also effects of erosion as a result of storm surges, strong winds, or other hazards. And so this has been ongoing work again that involves working with and enabling the regional and local community to really use the data and build the capacity to apply the data to inform better decisions. Let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to try to go through this very quickly. Just wanted to highlight a couple of other tools that are available. And so these are things available at the global level, like the NASA sea level projection tool. And so this is a tool that helps visualize and download global and regional sea level projection data. In addition, another tool that you see highlighted there is the fire information for resource management system. And so this is actually provides near real time data on fire and thermal anomalies within 3 hours of satellite observations. And so this can help detect the location and extent of fire activity and its effects on the land and the atmosphere. Again, this is a collaboration that, for example, in the US has been applied to help provide access to this data to support a number of efforts on the ground again. And lastly, I think this is my last slide. If we go to the next slide, I also wanted to highlight that there are a number of forthcoming, if you go to the next slide, please. And I think that's my last slide. So there are a number of forthcoming missions that also provide a lot of opportunities to further improve our ability to help countries and stakeholders around the world to better monitor progress and also make progress on sustainable development goals and improve the resilience of their communities. Highlighted here, you see SWAT, that is a mission jointly developed by NASA and CNES, the Centre National d'Études Spatiales. And so that mission will focus on making a global survey of the Earth's surface water and observing different details of the ocean surface topography, in addition to measuring how water bodies change over time. And so these are this is just one example. There are many other missions, again, in development. And so NICER is another one that really focus and help provide information that can improve or provide maps of surface soil moisture globally. And so that can again be very important for monitoring changes in the different ecosystems of our planet. And so we're continually looking to work with the human stakeholders at the regional, national, and local level to make, again, this information more actionable and to put the data and derived knowledge at use on the ground. If you go to the next slide, I think that's just the thank you slide. And with that, thank you very much.
Ravada, thank you very much. It was very important, and actually talking about the usage of the science, earth science researches and applications for the bettering risk-informed disaster preparedness and decision making. And I think the application of what you have mentioned, Earth observation risk toolkits to understand the risks, and especially in the light of the challenges which are faced due as a consequences of the climate change which we are experiencing now, is very essential at the local and the national level as well as the global level. Thank you very much. And I would like to present our last but not least speaker and honorary recipient of one of the important prizes in the world of the disaster risk reduction, Mr. Alan Lavelle, who is a recipient of United Nations Sasakawa Prize in 2015. And he is expert in disaster risk reduction at the local level. And his presentation will be about enhancing local authorities' capacities for prevention, adaptation, and mitigation of external shocks. Mr. Lavelle, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope that you can hear me well. I am talking from Lima in Peru, in a rather uncontrolled environment where there is a lot of background noise, which I hope does not interrupt. I have no control over it because I'm in a hotel in the center of the city. I'll try and keep to the 10 minutes. As assigned, I will talk about 3 points, with 3 points within each. And a lot of what I say will build on the very excellent presentation of Samuel right at the beginning and the later presentations which we have heard. The first point may be to get to some common understanding of things and definition, which is really important. 3 points on local, on external shocks, and on prevention, mitigation, and adaptation. Local, we understand, can be understood in many different ways, according to unitary or federal states, according to disciplines, and according to the size of countries. I'm going to understand it as being the smallest unit in which governance procedures occur. That means there is government and its related facets with civil society, etc. And so basically I'm talking about urban in many ways, although urban is from very large to very small, municipality, districts, boroughs, as they're called in certain parts, accepting that in some countries local is anything that is subnational. Secondly, external shocks. We are here defining more in terms of climate-related external shocks than anything else. That involves what we would call extreme events through to more regular, smaller scale, intrusive events which do cause damage, but which occur on a more regular basis and which complement externally generated extreme events, etc. We're talking about rainfall, we're talking about flooding, we're talking about things associated with maybe wave action, associated with sea level rise, etc. But we should realize, and this is very important, that climate-related hazards which lead to shocks in local areas, etc., take place in a medium which is also typified by other shocks from earthquakes, volcanoes, etc. So we are obliged to understand things in a more multi-hazard framework, whereby things that happen with one type of hazard can seriously affect others. Complexity, systemic risk, etc., are fundamental issues to be dealt with. The third element is prevention, mitigation, adaptation, and here there is a lot of debate of what is what. I'm going to understand prevention and mitigation in terms of the relationship to prevention to avoiding and mitigation to reducing. What are the risks associated with the shocks associated with hazards? And adaptation, I'm going to take in a more restricted fashion than many would take it, and look at it from the perspective of the way societies adjust to ongoing, at times more rapid, less rapid changes in climate averages. This complements the whole idea of prevention and mitigation of external shocks associated with extreme events. And we should also realize here very clearly that what happens with adaptation will severely affect what happens when we try to deal with shocks in an extreme event or continuous smaller scale event situation, and the reverse is also true. So we have to plan in terms of integrated climate management, not dealing just with shocks for one side or adaptation in the sense of everyday life on the other hand. So that's what I'd start off with, 3 points about the whole thing of enhancing local capacities. First, very clearly, we need an increased capacity to thoroughly understand on a very integral fashion what is risk and how risk is expressed at a local level. This involves hazard, vulnerability, exposure analysis, resilience. It involves looking at more complex situations. It involves looking at systemic risk, but it also involves looking at not just the measurement and the establishment of risk scenarios, but also at how people perceive and how they internalize risk in their daily lives, and in that way deal with it in one way or another. Local authorities in general are not able to do this thorough thing due to the second point, which is on the list, which is the access to finance in order to enact the different things which local governments need to do. Finance normally comes through subsidiarity principles of decentralization of finance from national central levels, but we have to work far more on encouraging the generation of local resources from different ways like tax, like taking back from the improvement of land by public investment and how we can tax that in order to have finance to invest in terms of risk reduction at a local level, other modalities which are in play today, etc. And the third aspect, which is very critical, obviously, is the capacity not only to enact new laws and institutional frameworks, new norms which govern people's behavior in terms of risk, from an exposure perspective, from a vulnerability perspective, even from the creation of socio-natural hazard perspective, but also the ability to identify in existing institutional setups and in existing legal setups and norms, aspects which can relate to risk reduction. And this brings us to a very important point, that local governments, like national governments, have to realize the risk is born within the interstices of development itself. It is based on inadequate development principles, incomplete development, skewed development principles, and therefore what we're looking for are laws and institutions and norms which can link in to development-based principles and sustainability in order to increase the potential for the reduction of risk. Now, when we say all of these three things, which are critical to enhancing local level, we have to realize that risk is born within development, not outside of it. The hazard may be outside of development, the risk is born within development. We have to realize that disaster risk management and adaptation occurs within the framework of development processes. And consequently, we have to realize there are many structural development processes which affect local and national areas which are outside of the control of disaster risk management authorities. Things like corruption, things like moral hazard, things like the inability of poorer groups to even accede to land which is safe due to the need for housing and the occupancy of insecure areas. And all of these things work against what would seem to be simple legal institutional principles around risk management and have to be dealt with in an integral framework. Last point is in terms of how is and where is risk constructed. Your local levels are considered to be absolutely fundamental in terms of risk management, mainly because risk finally, in the last instance, is manifested at local levels. You may have the same hurricane, but the risk associated with it will be differentiated according to vulnerability and exposure patterns in different parts, which are only local or microspatial units. So a large disaster in the end is the sum of myriads of small-scale local disasters conditioned in their risk and impact by local vulnerability and exposure conditions. Consequently, we have to realize this, and then we realize that a lot of risk is, in fact, generated by inadequate development principles at a local level. When you mine the slopes in cities or take building materials out of rivers, etc., when you concentrate population and densify, these are all local things that should theoretically be under the influence of local authorities. But at the same time, we must realize that cities are part of a global system, a national system, and therefore a lot of the risk which cities suffer today or local areas is generated in extra local spaces, national spaces. So if you have upper river deforestation, it will affect lower river communities. If you have migration of populations in mass, like is occurring in many parts of the world, and they relocate in cities inadequately dotado, that's Spanish, inadequately provided with resources to deal with it, both capacity and financial, you will get increased risk. And many other examples of external processes associated with trade and with trading patterns, with trading prices of products, with agricultural practice in rural areas, which influence risk in cities that have to be got on top of. And so I will stop with that in order to be within the time framework and pass the word back to the coordinator, and many thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lavelle. And I guess you clearly summarized the importance of our discussions on the risk-informed governments at the local level, that we need to understand the scope and dimensions, not only of the risks, but also of the impacts the risks can bring into the livelihood and well-being of our, and as well as on the sustainability of development plans of local communities. But also you call on the actions to have responsible and accountable leadership at all levels, which is a very essential, fundamental to make sure that when we talk about governments, these governments leads to the targeted and effective decisions which can be translated into tangible actions which can improve lives of the people. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to ask everyone to join me to thank our speakers for their brilliant presentations. And since we are running out of time, but the organizers allowed me to extend the time of our section, and we have 3 questions from the online platform, which I would like to start, and then I will open floor to 3 more from the floor here in the studio, and then we will conclude our session. And the first question is addressed to Sanjay. In order to enhance the governance involvement, we can build up more customized strategies for the focus group risk management and reduce the gaps of those polarized strategies, because those aged groups are replaced by younger groups. What do you think about the customized risk reduction strategies, and do you have exemplary cases for digital platform?
Thanks. I think, yeah, I mean, I mentioned this in my presentation also about the digital divide, and age is one of the dividing factors. So yes, if there is the possibility to have customized assessment for different age groups, that would definitely, I mean, age disaggregated, that would really be helpful. I've seen so many cases where, for example, senior citizens are left out of online basic services being provided by government because they firstly, they cannot operate smartphones. Secondly, the affordability question is another story altogether. So yes, that's a good idea. Digital platforms are a means to bring the services to the masses. And I think the only barrier is the skills. So if that can be overcome, then yes, they would work. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. The next question to Mr. Rajiv Garg. Climate smart technologies are one of the fast changing and developing area. In this aspect, we need to continue technology update and management for the regional group. Do we run those systems as well? And do you feel any pressures for keeping abreasting with new technologies? Dr. Kar?
Okay, means as I have said in my presentation, means the CTCN works on a demand-driven, country-driven approach. So the request comes from the countries through their focal point, and it should be a priority to the countries. If a particular request of a technology is made by more than one country, we group them together and we address them as a kind of a regional approach. What the regional groups can do, if they see a necessity of a technology transfer or necessity of any technology, they need to approach their the country focal points, and the country focal points needs to send the request to us, and then we'll support it. Because the idea behind is that it should be any request which comes to the CTCN should be a priority to the country. And this is how we approach. We do support countries undertake technology need assessments, and these they keep on updating and coming, and we keep on building their capacity so that they can do a technology need assessment as and when they want. And in that sense, we don't feel any pressure on keeping ourselves updated with the new technology, because first of all, we know that what the countries want through the technology need assessment and their NDCs and their various country planning documents. And secondly, also because we have a network of 750 institutions, and these institutions have expertise in their own field. Means they have various. They are on every focus area, and they have the best. They are the ones who support us in identification of cutting edge and new technologies. So we don't feel ourselves the pressure to keep ourselves updated on any technologies, because we bank on our network of institutions.
Thank you very much. And the last question from online platform, I think is addressed to Samuel. One of the challenges in addressing disaster preparedness and sustaining risk-informed governments is the lack, or if not, weak participation of the public sector, civil society organizations. So, what mechanisms should the government adopt to allow citizens to fully understand the idea of risk-informed governance, and how do you think should the government address this gap and integrate the participation of the citizens?
Thank you very much for the question. I think our past speakers in other sessions mentioned this, especially it has been a hot issue, how we involve multi-stakeholder engagement. Because the discussions have always been, okay, let's do multi-stakeholder engagement, let's bring everybody on board. How do we really do that? First, I know sometimes government has a space he doesn't want to share with people, even though we do lip services. But because everybody wants to protect their territory, right? But the idea is government should really create the enabling environment for everybody to thrive in. And creating this enabling environment requires political commitment, not just by saying it by word. You need to commit to it, where governments should be able to bring on board these people or stakeholders who should participate. I know sometimes the level of participation may even vary, because the interest of each of these stakeholders is different. For instance, what the private sector looks for is far more different from what the citizens themselves look for. So in creating this enabling environment, I know this morning there was another point on building trust. I think you mentioned that, because whilst we try to promote trust between government and the citizens, between government and the business sector, between government and the private sector and any other sector, may require building or opening up on trust. And this trust should be, whilst we're talking about it, it's still widening anyway, because citizens day by day are losing trust in the government. So building or opening up on trust is important. How do we then build this trust? There should be transparency, there should be accountability, and there should be inclusiveness. And these are some of the key tenets of effective public governance, and I want to place it on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samuel. I would like to take 2 questions from the floor. Okay, we have 4 questions, and with that we will conclude our session. Mr. Chowdhury.
Thank you, Sanjay. 3 very quick questions. First to Sanjay, because we are here around the table and we are trying to find solutions, responses. So you mentioned very candidly, and I agree with you fully, that governments are not taking the Sendai framework seriously. And I think, if you look at Sendai, there was the issue of biological hazards and pandemics, and COVID happened 4 years later, and governments were caught completely unprepared. So that is a very classic example. So how do you get governments to take the framework much more seriously? What is lacking there? Your views on it. Samuel, a very quick question. You talked about innovative financing for disaster risk reduction. We know that private funding has no appetite for adaptation and resilience. So how do we overcome that problem? And then to Mr. Laval, he talked about resilience in context of adaptation and mitigation. We now have a third pillar in the climate change discourse, and that is loss and damage. So how does resilience relate to loss and damage? Thank you.
Yeah, if I may quickly answer. Thanks for that question, very interesting point. I think the issue is awareness amongst the citizens, because they are the ones who can bear pressure on the governments. Governments will work the way they work, and there are certain things about bureaucracy, maintaining status quo and so on, and not thinking out of the box and so on. So all these issues are there, but it's the citizens. Once they are aware, they can bear pressure on the governments, and they can guide or rather nudge the government in the directions, because governments usually are responsive to what the citizens are saying. So it's the citizens' awareness that is required first, their awareness, their capacity, and then their voice.
Thank you, Sanjay. Samuel?
Yes, thank you for the brilliant question. I think it's a technical one, but I will try to answer it. For instance, just as you mentioned, private sector is driven by profit, basically, let's put it that way. And investment in these areas, especially in issues about disasters, are something about loss. So getting the private sector or the profit-making segment of the society to come in is something very tricky but very difficult, but it will be very important we still invite them, because we have this idea, I know it's becoming a cliche, where we talk about private people, now added the people's element, people's private-public partnerships. We could attempt that and look at how we could bring on board the private sector, even though theirs may be driven by higher returns or more profits interest. But the other one is government could create an environment, just as I mentioned before, in providing subsidies to this, maybe providing tax breaks to this private sector, or providing some kinds of opportunities for these private sectors to strive, so that they could contribute to financing or supporting disasters issues or disaster risk issues. That's what I think. For instance, where some companies who come in, or private sectors who comes in to set up their businesses, are given some number of years not to pay tax, or some number of years or some percentage of subsidies, so that they could work during that period, and it could be a motivation to have them contribute to this, even though it's not very attractive to them. That's what I think.
Thank you very much, Samuel. And we would like to address the question of Mr. Chowdhury to Mr. Laval on loss and damages.
Yeah, I'm increasingly frustrated with the way resilience is used and the multiple interpretations, so it's very difficult to answer the question directly. If we take resilience as being responses post-impact, according to situations which exist pre-impact, then loss and damage obviously has a significant influence in terms of, if we take resilience as being ex-ante interventions, obviously loss and damage also is directly related to it. So it depends your perspective on resilience, how you interpret it, and there are multiple interpretations around nowadays. One worrying thing about resilience and adaptation as such is that with the damage and loss formula and the association with extreme events, we tend to distract from vulnerability and exposure and tend to recover what was called a physicalist approach to understanding risk based on hazard. And one understands the logic of that, but there are big dangers in it. And we're going back 30 years in the discussion of risk in society.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lavelle. And so we have 3 questions from the floor. Yes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Salvo Chamo from Mozambique. I'm a green economy focal point. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the organizers to bring out this topic for this symposium. As I think it's an important forum to, to how to move forward for, for better address the climate and disaster issues. As might you know, Mozambique is one of the most vulnerable to risk disasters and climate change, and also face a challenge regarding access to the technologies and the financing and the other kind of resource in order to overcome these issues. And also we have, let's say, a robust and sound policy framework. We have developed the adaptation climate plans at the local level. So I think you're gonna have to discuss more, exchange more about your assistance regarding this. But I have a specific question for the last speaker. In Mozambique, you would like to introduce the issue of climate insurance. So I would like to know from your experience how is effective this tool. As you know that most of the farmers in Mozambique every year they lost their crops due to those disaster events, but those financial institutions are not, let's say, strong enough to, to intervene in an effective manner. So I would like to hear from you, from your experience, how can you address effectively this climate insurance? And for the Mr. Plast, I would like to know also how can we engage with the countries, African countries, how to can get the support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the question to Mr. Lavelle about the climate insurance, please.
Well, I think the whole topic of insurance itself, which has been prevalent in the debate on disaster risk for some long time now, has progressed enormously in the sense that the inclusion of elements that actually permit us to think that insurance as a transfer mechanism can be reflected in terms of reduced disaster risk for the future. And I think that is the critical aspect, that if we rely on insurance as compensating loss and damage, then we are lost in the formula of risk reduction. But if we think of insurance in terms of assuring better practices prior to the occurrence of events which reduce risk, and there are many, many examples of indigenous techniques. You can go to Bolivia and to Peru in Latin America with some excellent examples of traditional techniques of guaranteeing that insurance is related to the reduction of existing risk or the prediction of future risk. And so I think the key thing is, in general with risk, is that guaranteeing that it isn't just a mechanism of guaranteeing compensation and therefore could in fact encourage risk construction, but it has to be the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lavelle. And the next question was addressed to Mr. Platt, right?
Thank you so much. It's a very simple question and simple answer. I can share it again in the chat function. there's an email address that you can just use to get in touch with me. And we use a sort of a multi-tier approach where we usually ask local governments to just look into our online resources and our online structured training first. And if there's sort of a critical mass of local governments interested in more sort of field-based support, UN is of course a member states-based organization. So usually we then ask, and we can help with that, local governments to link up with their Ministry of Local Government to express a more sort of official demand for technical assistance, and that has happened in Africa already with the Gambia, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and even Somalia. So we're quite active there. But please just contact me through the email provided in the chat function. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Platz. Yes, the last two questions.
Thanks so much. My question is directed to Ms. Cavada. Excuse me if I mispronounced the name. Regarding understanding climates and wildfire using earth science, and to what extent the toolkit is effective and efficient? If so, how the devastating huge wildfires are happened in many countries of the world, including my country, which affects the World Natural Heritage, the first World Natural Heritage National Park in Africa even. So, to what extent this earth science is used by the countries, and if so, what is the challenges to use this toolkit to prevent and control the devastating wildfires? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Cavada.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. Very important question. So I think, I've highlighted one of the examples that I showed was, for example, one tool that was using information from satellites and then distributed through a system called the Fire Information for Resource Management System. And so this is globally available information that helps detect the location and extent of fire activity. And so in several recent, for example, events of strong wildfires in different areas across the world, we've seen examples of collaboration between US, European, and other scientists to address such phenomena and provide information to local governments. I'm thinking of some wildfires, for example, in Greece, and how that information was leveraged to locate and help address efforts at a localized level. I think one of the challenges is that with climate change, the intensity and frequency of such phenomena is intensifying. And so being able to build the capacity and skills of managers and people on the ground is very critical, so that we can build this capability and make governments more ready, ready to fight such big challenges. So I think that one of the key challenges is really building the capacity. I think there is awareness, and of course we can do more with respect to awareness, but more importantly, we need to do more around developing the skills and capacity of individual governments and local stakeholders, people, to really leverage the data. One of the things that I'll say is we're also really promoting this open source, openness of not just the data, but also the science and information that goes behind the data. And there are a lot of efforts to also validate information from space to make it more accurate, more, and again, leveraging technology to really provide it in a real-time manner. But to the extent that we can continue to working together to better understand what is needed and how to help again develop the capacity of local governments to leverage that information. I think we need to do more there in order to continue to tackle this huge challenge.
Much for the comprehensive response. And the last question, please.
I'm Sharon Hewavaduge, Assistant Director from the Sustainable Development Council. And my question also goes to Ms. Kawaga. In your presentation, you mentioned that you are generating the water quality data based on Google Earth engines. So we are at the Council, Sustainable Development Council is currently conducting statistical capacity development sessions with government institutions. And this year we have prioritized water quality indicators. So we would also like to take this data generated through these Google Earth engines for our assessments. One of the issues we found during this capacity development process is we couldn't match all the parameters proposed in the UN metadata. So at least one parameter is out of compliance status. So we would like to know about what is the methodology, the accuracy level of the data generated through Google Earth Engine and the methodology, and is it publicly available so we could use in our analysis. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Dr. Kawada.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, I think in one of my slides there was an example where some of the data and methods were made available through Google Earth Engine, and so that's just one of the applications or tools leveraged to provide this information. Definitely, I want to highlight that all of the data and algorithms and science behind, in this case, water quality specific data are made available through NASA's portals, and so I'm happy to include a couple of links to the chat, but all of this is also available, so the observations and related applications in addition to specific methods, algorithms, and metadata is available, and so it can be discovered through the Earth Data Search at NASA completely openly and freely. And again, there are different applications that have been developed using Google Earth Engine or other GIS-enabled tools, both open and free, and as well as proprietary. But you can access all that information and related, again, science and guidance documents through NASA's Earth Science resources, and so I'll include a link to the chat.
Thank you very much. And actually, I would like to also highlight the importance that there is a possibility to continue discussion with the speakers using the online board. Participants can go to the event page at UNEPOC and register for the online discussion. So it's not the end of our communications. And I would like with that to thank all our speakers. Please give them a warm round of applause. And it seems that this subject itself is very essential in our process of implementing the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction as a part of reaching, achieving the sustainable development goals. It's never ending. So thank you very much for your contribution from the floor, from online audience, and I wish you all the best, and congratulations to the organizers, and wish you to have productive continuation of discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more announcement, sorry. The organizers asked me to say that they would like, yes, they would like to our audience to take a few minutes to evaluate today's sessions using the post-event survey QR code, which is on the table and on site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency Sayana. and all the panelists for your valuable knowledge sharing and exchange of experience, and the audience in here and in online for your active engagement and during discussion. So for your lunch, you may refer to the information note for several options. And we also have some light lunch like yesterday. And you can also, go outside in the convencia here. There are lots of food court, restaurants. And our field visit will start at 1:20, not 1:30, 1:20. So please make sure to be in front of this ballroom at 1:20. And our colleague will give you some kind of handband, who are going. And please make sure our session will start tomorrow at 9. So it would be appreciated if you could come like 8:50 at least, so that we can start at 9 sharp. So this in the special session 2, and I would like to request you to enjoy the field visit, study visit, and learn more about the Incheon Metropolitan City, Smart City, and other. Thank you very much.